Hello and welcome to the 50th episode of the All Walks of Life podcast. Yes, I mean, it's almost been a year and I've already completed 50 episodes. It's like, thank you everyone for supporting this podcast so much. Everyone who has tuned in from just the first episode where I was trying to figure my way out when I had Ganeshan on, my good friend, and just asked him to just speak. I think it was something was new for him, new for me as well. So yeah, I mean, I've already done 50 episodes and it's just been something which has been a learning curve, as I have mentioned. Something through each episode, I've learned something new, something that I have taken away with each and every conversation. And as I keep mentioning on every particular episode, as such, that I genuinely feel that the only way for societies to make progress is through conversation, as Sam Harris, who is another intellectual I look up to, does talk about. So yeah, man, like, thank you so much for everyone who has tuned in, for supporting my work, listening to the conversations, and giving me feedback as to what they have thought about the conversations as well. I'm really fortunate to have listeners who do tune in. But yeah, if you would like this to continue, I mean, I'm just going to try making it continue. I know 50 is just a very small milestone comparing to the greats of, as I mentioned, Sam Harris, your Joe Rogans of the world. So I think they have a long way to go and I'll keep striding towards it. Anyways, enough of the emotional stuff. My guest on the show today is Jackie Thakkar. He's a screenwriter and creative professional who works for FilterCopy. Now, FilterCopy are a channel who have one of the biggest followings on YouTube India really, and they also have made content on other platforms such as Instagram. I find their content to be really great in terms of, even though it's short form content, it's really punchy. It really gets to the heart of what people often don't take the time to explore in their in their lives really. Things like relationships. And I think I had this conversation with Jackie on the podcast that with things like live-in relationships as well, even though we may think that it doesn't explicitly put out political content or content that may take sides, if you want to list it in a political context, which I don't really like to do it in that way, but just for an example, implicitly it does have those roots, if that makes sense, and that then make society think about the content in a certain way, which I found really interesting, and I hope you guys enjoy the conversation when we do get into the meat of it. Other than that, we did talk a lot about the manner in which conversations are being held on platforms, on the media, among other things, polarized content, cancel culture, just the sort of things I like exploring, and also the aspect of writing in itself, because I was pretty intrigued to see what a process of a screenwriter takes, because screenwriting in itself is something, obviously it's alien to me because it's not my field of expertise. So that was great to almost pick Jackie's brain as to what's his process like and what are some of the constraints that he has to work within working for a company like FilterCopy, among other things. So yeah, if that's something that would that floats your boat, here's the conversation.
Should I switch off the lights at the back?
No, it's fine. Like, I don't, because it's fine for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'll start. Hey Jackie, welcome to the All Walks of Life podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on, man.
Thank you so much for having me, man, Ishan. And I'm really sorry about the delay. It's just been one of those Mondays. Like, yeah, just been meeting after meeting. So sorry to keep you waiting, but I'm glad you had a book for company. That must have been.
No, yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I'm a big fan of Dostoevsky, so I'm just rereading some of his books. So yeah,
Nice.
yeah. Okay, so you were talking about this, right? So can you give us a rundown of a little bit about yourself, like a background about yourself, like what you do and what keeps you busy?
Sure. So I mainly am a screenwriter, and now I'm more like I manage a team of writers and directors, but I'm a creative through and through, just mainly in the short format zone for YouTube and just sketches. Like it just happened that I grew up on a lot of Saturday Night Live, and I always liked like little jokes because I tried my hand at comedy as well. And then when I got a job at Array. That's where I really got to start to write like short format YouTube content. I started to understand it. And yeah, I think if I could describe my work, it would be I'm a writer primarily, but it's like comedy writing. That's my specialty.
Right. Like, so, I mean, obviously, for people who aren't well versed with the comedy space that much, like, how different would you say it is to, let's say, normal writing? I mean, I don't even know if I want to call it normal writing, but let's say writing for other sorts of things, writing articles, writing books, or those sorts of things. So, what's your process like when you are sitting down to write scripts, right? Okay, again, like, there's another thing that some people find offensive. I don't know if I don't even know if offensive is the right word. So some people don't like calling themselves comics, some people don't like calling themselves comedians. But like, what's the whole thing? Do you know a little bit about this?
I just like to be called, man. Like I don't
What are
have
your
a
pronouns?
preference. Yeah, let's not go there, dude. I have a lot of jokes there, but no. Mm, no, I don't have a problem with the moniker per se. I just, for some reason, I hate the term content writer. I find that
Okay.
very generic. That's the only term I get kind of like peeved with when someone says it, because it's very reductive. I think creator is a better term overall for just everyone who either has like an active social media presence, as well as is working a day job in the creative
Hmm.
in like the media industry as a creative. I think it's fair to call us like creators. um but yeah, I don't have a preference, man. Like I've stopped correcting people. I know that like my job isn't, it's too all encompassing to have a definition. But yeah, sometimes I just tell people I make content, or like I make content happen, like help other people create content. So yeah, it's
Right.
just
No,
that's
that's fascinating, and that's something I'd like to get into as well a little bit later.
yeah.
But can you just, for the listeners, for the viewers, for me as well, like, what's your process like when you sit down to write a script and you're working on a project? Because again, you said that you're working on a wide variety of things, a wide variety of content. So from my understanding, it may not be the same, right? Like your process of writing a script, for example, for FilterCopy, or to put something out on social media even. So yeah, what's the general breakdown there?
Hmm. um I think my process it's very context driven. Like it really has a lot to do with what's going on around me, and at the same time, what I'm feeling internally. I know a lot of writers have a very set formula. I don't. Like a lot of the things I've written are because, it was something that caught my fancy. And I've been lucky to have bosses and companies that I've worked with who've been giving enough and kind enough to just go with my instinct. Like I remember when I wrote the first "If Gaitonde Was Your Teacher," which became a huge hit. But I told my boss that, dude, I'm watching Sacred Games and it's really good, and I think it would be really funny if we do a Gaitonde sketch for Teachers Day. And she laughed it off. She's like, yeah, sure, let's see what you can come up with. And I narrated the script, and they were all in splits. And then it just was the right mix of things. Like the actor who we got to play him,
Mm.
Sagar Karande, just nailed it. Like I met him and I was like, oh my god, this is going to be good. And yeah, it turned out to be pretty great. I think that did like some 7-8 million views, which for a channel that had, I think we didn't even have 1 million subscribers then, but it really put us on the map that year. Like I remember getting like awards and like things like that. And I was like, wow, wait, like I was just doing this for giggles and it just worked out. And then I started taking it seriously because I realized that, okay, there's a method. Like you take good content, right, is context mixed with relatability. So if you take something that's already trending or something that's on people's mind, and you present it in a relatable way, like we all have teachers, right, that we can think back to, like from SSC, that was the universe. So you take that relatable universe and you mix it with something contextual, which at that time was Sacred Games and Gaitonde. And I think that is more often than not the right kind of formula for me. Like I try to have that filter with all my scripts. Like, if it's not as contextual, try to make it very relatable and funny that people will share it. So one of those two boxes though have to be checked.
Yeah, coming to the contextual and let's say being having it be relatable to the people a little later, but I sort of want to understand this. So when you talk about it coming through instinct, or it coming through something that you're just that just caught your fancy in, that, if I may say so, like, is that in itself really hard? Because I've often heard writers, comedians, etc. talk about this aspect that often it's very difficult if they only stick to their instinct. If they're only thinking about, okay, if there's something that catches, if there's something that comes to my mind, only then will I start writing. So I'm forgetting. So there's this writer who says that. So he was asked, do you only write when inspiration strikes you, or do you have a set routine as to you take time out and you write every day? So he says that, yeah, I have my inspiration strike me every day at 9 a.m. in the morning. So he basically said he doesn't believe in this aspect of, or not rather believe, but he says that it's more productive, let's say, to have a set schedule in place and then just write, even if things may not come to you, but just if you're writing for a couple of hours, 3 hours, whatever, just stick there, stick to your laptop, stick to your notepad and write. So like, how difficult is it that if you, like, I don't know, do you think about this?
I do think about this a lot. And that's why, when I'm given a deadline on a script, I try very hard to do what, the person you just quoted said, which is like sit at a certain time, don't wait for inspiration. And honestly, if you're a writer who's got a day job like I do, you're already in like the privileged 10% bracket of writers. So you can't take that for granted. Like, I have not historically been great at deadlines. I've always found a way to find a happy mesh with it. But I would say that it's a struggle, at least for me personally. I don't know about everyone. I really admire writers who can just clock in, clock out, write. I am big on like, yaar, aaj mere ko aa raha hi nahi hai wo. Like, aaj mere se nahi hoga. There's too much going on, and I've been an advocate for this also. Like, I've told other young writers in my team that, look, if it's not coming to you on a certain day, or if you're just going through something, like, dude, look at where we're living. Like, it's just the times we're living in. It's hard to be like, haha, let's write a joke today. Like, nahi hota hai na. So a lot of days, you have to have that empathy for yourself and like with your peers as well. That it's sometimes hard, especially as a comedy writer, to like clock in at 9 a.m. and like be like, I will write 10 pages today. I do that, and they're almost always trash. And then when I sit back to write it, it's like, okay, kuch kar sakte hain iska. But it's a struggle, is all I'll say. Like, I struggle with finding that balance.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So when you talk about this aspect of relatability and this aspect of sort of thinking about the context in which the thing comes out, the content comes out, be it a script or what have you, like, so my understanding here is that you sort of have an audience in mind. Even if you may loosely want to work on a script, you know that it's catering to whatever millennials, people on social media, this, that, whatever. So I don't know, does that, like, is that a good thing? So that doesn't, so that even though it confines you, you know what you want to get out of this piece? Or is that then I don't know, is that then too restricting? Because then you're sort of you have to confine to this way of thinking, this way of writing, because it has to go out to these people.
So what I've learned so far is, and again, I'm still learning and evolving as a writer, so I don't have all the answers. But what I personally have learned is that if you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one. So it's actually very good to ask yourself before you start to write, who is my audience? Like, literally, I like to profile a person in my head. I go like, this will be shared by 24-year-old Richa from Lokhandwala, who went to Mithibai, who understands these references. Sometimes it's good to dig that deep, because then you know that, okay, this is a demographic. This is like the young urban TG. If I'm writing something like a 4 a.m. conversation, it's like, I know that's going to appeal to maybe a slightly more mature audience. And at a company as big as FilterCopy, which is really just at this point, it's a smooth running machine. We have weekly meetings where the numbers are assessed, and you go into the YouTube backend. Sorry about that. I'm gonna silence that. Yeah, where we go into the YouTube backend, and they assess. They tell us that, Jackie, this piece, like this video, really worked well with the 25 to 35 audience, which is unique because, like, usually our audience is the 18 to 24 audience. It worked well with females, or it worked better with males, and they give us these insights, which I try to gauge, and I try to take learnings from that. And yeah, I to answer your question, I think like your audience profiling before you start to write is a good practice. Like, sometimes, great, just write something and be like, this is something I've written from the heart. But always, yeah, it's good to ask yourself, why will someone share this? and who is the person that's going to share this?
Because you are writing for a company in that sense, you have to take these things into consideration. But I mean, I don't know, is that like, I don't know if it's the same question again, but like, do you ever feel that then maybe the idea you're trying to present isn't being brought out correctly, possibly, or maybe there are some values that you stand as a writer when you want to share something as an art form, as a piece that you want to put out, then that sort of has a clash with, let's say, the corporate motives that a company like FilterCopy or a company of that sort of magnitude may want.
Oh, yeah. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but yeah, it can. It does pose a problem. I'll put it succinctly, because yes, like when you're writing for a 10 million channel, it's definitely like you have a responsibility to the audience that's already built, that creators before you have helped build. And that's one of the things why I really keep talking about my time at Array so much, because when I joined Array, right, we were 3 writers who joined together, 4 writers who joined together, and the channel was at some 400K subscribers when we joined. And I think by the time all 4 of us left, it was at close to like 2 million or something.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't have rules, right? It was just like, okay, let's throw what we can and see what fits. And eventually we understood the niche. Here at FilterCopy, there's a very pronounced, a very predefined sort of audience that's already sort of hooked in. So you have to keep that audience in mind. It can be restrictive, especially if you're trying out newer things, because like, why reinvent the wheel when you have something that works? And I think we get the highest volume of brand inquiries for any short format content creator or YouTube channel out there, because FilterCopy is a very brand friendly presence on digital. A lot of brands like being associated with FilterCopy and the kind of content we make. So especially when a brand comes on board and they have restrictions, plus the restrictions that you just brought up about the TG and like not restricting yourself to that. That's what makes the job challenging. But if you master this and you find a way to either convince the client or the brand कि यार ये चलेगा तुम्हारे brand के लिए, तुम tension मत लो, or the higher ups at FilterCopy, which I have sort of developed a reputation now of just being the guy who's like, let's try this, and then be like, two channel, but like it is a fight, but that's also what makes the job fun for me, like knowing that I'm not free to do whatever I want. I have to go through certain layers, and all those people are at the positions they are in because they also have a lot of creative jobs.
Yeah.
And they understand the business of content. So yeah, man, if you're a writer being paid monthly salary in today's day and age, you have to find that balance between the business side and the creative side, which yeah, I've just sort of gotten behind now. I'd say I used to not write very brand friendly stuff, dude. Like it just like cuss words and all of that. Now I'm literally this cookie cutter FilterCopy guy, and it's fun. The contrast is fun.
So something I wanted to touch base on was, so you mentioned this aspect that let's say the marketing team or the people who look at the analytics at FilterCopy or any of the brands for that matter, they come back to you as a writer or whoever, as a creative professional, to say that, acha, look, this video that you put out, the script that you had put forward, it's got this sort of a rating, it's worked with these demographics and what have you. Like the general question I want to sort of pose here is that obviously the both of us know about how the algorithm works, right? On any of the social media platforms, be it YouTube, Instagram, what have you. And you've also sort of hinted at a channel like FilterCopy already having a fan base, which even though you shouldn't be labeling it as such, you can sort of generalize it in a manner that the people who do generally come to your on the platform to watch those sorts of things. So the thing is, do you feel that that's good, obviously, to build the brand as such, but it will then confine the channel, or it will confine even independent content creators in a label? Because something I've recently been thinking about, and I've mentioned this on the podcast recently. So there's this podcaster in India who I really rate, Amit Varma. He does The Seen and the Unseen. It's a great podcast. I'd recommend it. So he says that the more time we spend on social media, he feels that social media, the more time you spend there, the more extreme you get, and doesn't matter which side you align, be it the right or the left, it's because obviously with the echo chambers and those sorts of things, but that's the only thing you will be seeing then. And obviously FilterCopy doesn't do that that strongly political stuff that's out there, but even with the lifestyle things that it does, don't you feel that that in itself could hint towards something, or am I looking too far ahead in the future?
Hint towards something
For
as in like,
I don't know, maybe if you are putting on millennial sort of content out there, maybe things about live-in relationships or those sorts of things, something that maybe it's easy for people in metro cities to talk about, but
Mhm.
perhaps may not be in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So do you think that in itself, I'm just taking an example here, that in itself could then
Got
sort
you.
of,
Hmm. No, I totally get where you're coming from. Were you done? Sorry, I don't want to
yeah,
cut you off.
go on, yeah. Like, were you able to
Yeah.
grasp it? So in the sense that with live-in relationships, then would that, with people from tier 2, tier 3 cities, then start to associate that with the way they should act in their lives, or
Hmm.
I don't know, yeah.
That's actually a very interesting observation about the live-in relationships thing, and we've gotten like sometimes in our comments there will be flack for the kind of depictions we have of couples. Okay, now we look at it as aspirational. Okay, and when I joined FilterCopy as well, I started to understand, because before I was with the competition, right? I was with Array, and like it was very cool at Array to be like, oh, ye to kitna sweet, happy-go-lucky, they are living in their bubble and we do edgy stuff. But when I came here, I understood the science behind it, and I understood they take their messaging very seriously. Okay, FilterCopy, and I learned this as part of Pocket Aces का एक internal team बनाया हमने 7 members का. We were all assigned one person from each team of Pocket Aces. I was representing FilterCopy there. There were people from Dice Media, there were people from Jambo, there were people from Gobble, and our sole job was to meet some 4 hours a week, okay, and call our audience. Like we put out a Excel sheet out saying that we want to talk to you guys, our audience, and we want to know what you all think of our content. Even Nutshell was part of this. Even Jambo was part of this. And what you're mentioning, the live-in thing, along with other little things, I spoke to people. I spoke to this girl who is in Kota, and she mentioned to me that what I like about FilterCopy, and one distinct scene that she remembered from even before I had joined FilterCopy, was she saw this scene of a girl with all her friends, in one of those FilterCopy settings, like probably like fairy lights at the back and all of that, but not at home, not at home, but she was outside at 12 midnight cutting her cake with her friends, boys and girls, which she said that to me, that is something I could never imagine. I didn't even know that is a thing, because we don't realize how urban a concept that is. But to a lot of our audience, we give them that aspiration of, yaar, main ye kar sakti. Like this is stuff that I want to emulate. And this is stuff that if I move to a bigger city, or even if in my city, I can change the attitudes of people. Ki 12 baje hum bahar nikal ke we can cut cakes, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think FilterCopy has been that influence on a lot of, even though yes, our content does get that sort of tier 1 city vibe. I think a lot of what we neglect is that we are also influencing a lot of other tier cities. We're giving them something to look up to, be it live-in relationships, which again, controversial, can't take a stand on it. But if we normalize these things, if we make it seem like, okay, it's not that big a deal, you can have an opinion and keep it to yourself, or even vocalize it, that's fine. But as long as you don't sit and just hate on people, for just doing what they want. And I think, yeah, like at least the way I look at it is, FilterCopy content is not as tier 1. I don't like to call it that. It's not urbanized, it's aspirational. And I think we are helping change attitudes and mindsets on certain things.
Yeah, that's so interesting to think about it, that even if you guys aren't putting out political content as such, with the content you are putting out can be sort of taken in a political manner. But another thing I sort of wanted to hint at was, even sort of if you label it as aspirational, do you think that that puts a lot of like, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'd like to get your views on it, in the sense that if you are putting a content piece out, Do you feel that with the example you gave of that girl in Kota or wherever for that matter, they may sort of aspire to that acha, this is possibly, they might find it, as you said, aspirational, something that they look forward to, like the content you put out. Do you think like that responsibility is good or bad? Like in the sense that because then people are sort of really waiting for your content. They're looking up to your content to sometimes even orient their lives, right? Because with the examples you're giving, and which may not be, I don't know. I don't think many of the content platforms think in that manner. They may simply think about how do we get the numbers, how do we get the revenue, or what have you, whatever.
Yeah, of course, that's a big part of it. The revenue is always a big part of
Yeah,
any, like if you're a company as big as Pocket Aces, that's definitely a consideration. But to come back to your question, right? Like if it's a good thing or a bad thing, I think if you've entered the jargon of pop culture, which I think FilterCopy did way back like when little things came out, right? And we entered that jargon and we became sort of, I wouldn't say influencers because I don't like that term, but we became sort of change makers in many ways, because like, if like, and I can talk about TVF ka shows also right now, like Aspirants and all of that. There are things like the Sandeep Bhaiya thing, it has found its way into pop culture. That we have an impact on what's so funny.
The
Sandeep Bhaiya thing.
So I haven't seen that particular thing, but yeah. Anyhow, go on. Sorry.
So I just feel like when you're a platform that has influence and that has a certain voice with the youth, like with the millennials or the Gen Zs now, you do have that responsibility. And I think it's very good to think about that responsibility rationally before you put out your content, which I'm very proud of the fact that FilterCopy does. All our channels at Pocket Aces does actually. We're very mindful of the kind of impact we're making. We don't take stances because we know that's just something that is going to create ripples in a bad way. And we like our platform to be the place where people come to disconnect and maybe not think about those things, because there's a lot out there too. Like you follow me on Instagram, you'll find out I am as vocal about my position on certain political things as anyone else. Individually, a lot of my team members are too, but we don't put that in our scripts. We don't put that out in our content because we don't want to sway the pendulum in a certain way. We treat it as two separate entities, which I think is a fair stance. Wasn't that way earlier when I was at my previous company. There we literally we took jabs at everyone, and yeah, it's just here there's more of a different approach to that.
Yeah, so when you're talking about this aspect of trying to keep it clean as much as possible, like how difficult is that? Because the manner in which I look at content is that any sort of content is political in its essence, because it's representing something about society, something about life, whatever the writer values, whatever the content professional values. So even in a manner that you aren't making things explicit with the content you are putting out, maybe mentioning names or whatever, like I don't know, maybe this is just a follow-up on the previous question. It is sort of embedded in the thing. So like how difficult is it to guard against those biases that writers in itself have, right? Because I think every individual looks at the world through biases, and that's what forms them, right? And we can't look at the world without biases, if that makes sense.
I got you. Like just the other day, I was asked to change the name of the villain in my script. कि ये इसमें villain का नाम अमित क्यों रखा है? मत रखो. This is a political. This did not happen. Okay, I'm just kidding. Like no, none of this happens. See, I don't agree if like any content, if it's political. I think some things are just jokes and people should learn to take it as that. Not everything is a statement per se. And yeah, like if you're just choosing to not go a certain direction with certain things like names or depictions, like we've done videos that are very pro LGBTQ. We've done a whole series of firsts, which was, I think, the first like mainstream digital representation of like a same-sex couple on Dice with firsts. I think it was season 4, if I'm not mistaken. So we have taken very progressive stances. We've taken very aspirational stances on things. How they get interpreted is something that we don't get into. Like we read the comments, we know we are looked at in a certain way, but it's just it's not something we lose sleep over. Like, because as long as like, I think our main goal, and it goes to FilterCopy like essence, curing boredom. Like if you're out there just looking to tune in to something that you want to watch to make you feel upbeat and better, that's our channel for you. And we want to evolve. Like, I had this meeting with my boss, with the whole team, some like couple of months ago, where we were discussing like, what do we do now? Because I along with the rest of the team, we're all very conscious of the fact that we can't be doing listicles forever. So we're looking at new formats. I personally have taken the lead with trying to come up with a lot more new formats. I have a little core team that I'm forming, where all our main job is to do newer, fresher stuff that, like, I have one goal for 21-22. Like, we want to become the go-to content hub for any millennial or Gen Z out there. If you're on YouTube, we want you to search for FilterCopy and see ki Tuesday ko kya video nikla. And yes, maybe over the past couple of years, there has been a waning decline in short format in general. It's not just our channel, but because everyone's making a series. There are OTT platforms just begging people to make series for them. So YouTube participation in general has gotten thoda this thing. But we're up for the challenge, and I think it's a very interesting time right now. We have a lot of new young writers, young perspectives that I think will change that. And you maybe next time we have this conversation, you'll probably tell me, wow, like you guys, y'all have started taking stances, and hopefully, that will be the case.
But what do you have to sort of say, just sticking on to this particular thing before we move on to others, I guess, is the fact that in India, if you still want to call it in that sense, however much we may value free speech, I mean, there are still so many things we're just filtering out whenever we're even thinking about, Acha, we're having an open conversation, but are we really having an open conversation, if that makes sense? So even with a channel of FilterCopy size in that sense, for the most part, if it was in another country, let's say, you could have gotten away with some of the things that you want to, and that would be that would be looked up to in society, because you are I understand, let's say, the philosophy behind the corporates, and that's something that they would want to stick away from. But what do you think of the landscape in general, though, in India, and how we look at free speech in that sense?
Well, look, in many ways, right now are turbulent times. I think everyone's a little mindful of, because like post Geo only, right? Post 2016, I think what happened to the digital landscape, according to me, is that before 2016, it was very like urban, it was like the AIBs and the FilterCopies, and even TVF. TVF was still doing like sort of pervasive, but Delhi ke aage, matlab Delhi ke aspas, NCR area ka humor. But then after Geo came into the picture, right? And I truly believe this, okay? Your audience went from just Mehul in South Bombay to like any dude in Meerut or any dude in like person in Kota. Like it just opened things up in a beautiful way, because now we have so much, like so many regional references, so much regional content that's out there. There are OTT platforms like Ullu, which cater specifically to the masses. Like you go to a person who is, say, like just like understanding content right now, and a lot of them, like a lot of the students that I talk to also, they are very aware of all the content that's being consumed. That mainly happened after Geo, because Geo opened up the landscape for all of us. They kind of just increased our audience like by tenfold. So yeah, I've kind of lost track of your question again. Can you?
So I wanted to sort of get a grip on.
No,
that's fine, and that's what podcasts are for, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, I guess it links in as well, because in my estimation, with Geo coming up and so much more content than being out there, it just gives more people speech in that sense, even if it's not entirely what people can and cannot say, but just giving more people the option to say on these platforms.
Yeah.
So I guess we were there.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was. But what was your question?
My question was as such about the whole concept of free speech in our society and how we view it. Because see, you make content on so many of these creative platforms, right? Like, and sometimes I feel that that it really varies. as to the things you can and cannot say, even on different platforms, which is odd.
Got you. Yeah. So no, coming to your free speech thing, what I was leading towards was that Geo opened it up, right? So I think our concept of free speech has really evolved after that, because before that, spaces like Twitter, spaces like YouTube, all of that were very urban, urban English medium speaking people, lack of a better term, dominated. Okay. Uske baad, I think what happened is we started to see ki yaar, these people have a voice and they're vocal and they are ready to not just consume content, but like, you know, demand content that represents them. Right. So free speech, I think, has definitely been affected since that happened, because we started to see that people have so many other voices. It's not just our political opinions or our kind of content or our little bubbles that we're living in. The echo chambers, what you mentioned earlier, it's much beyond the echo chamber. Like India as a whole, now everyone has a voice after Geo. Like everyone is on, like whether you're in a tier 1 city, tier 2 city, tier 3 city, you have either some Twitter presence or like you're on Facebook, you're very actively vocalizing your thoughts about everything from the government to how you think some content is cringe. Like free speech is very much alive, but I just feel like it is like we should maybe just have more empathy than free speech right now, because like we are all now suddenly aware of each other's opinions, which makes us all kind of just be like, oh my god, like this person doesn't think like me. I just like to not think beyond. I don't like to think within that confinement. Yeah, if this person has a political opinion that's so and so and mine differs, that doesn't mean I can't be friends with him. That doesn't mean I can't understand his perspective or make like, you know, make him laugh, or like, you know, there are commonalities that bind all of us together, Ishan. I think, like, you know, we all love our moms. We all want to be loved. And I think at the end of the day, we all want a certain level of validation. And these are common grounds. It doesn't matter if you're so-and-so ka supporter or so-and-so ka supporter. That these are common things, which is what I think if we have empathy, you can all just come together and think about that and then move forward. Be like, I like nudging my friends who don't have the same opinion as me. But that doesn't mean that is all our relationship is. Like I also at the same time will, like, you know, call them if their mom is sick and be like, hey, I care for you and, you know, you'll be fine and this and that. So these don't define us. Free speech is alive and well. But I think if we used free speech more to empathize with each other and less to divide and find differences, it would be in a better position than it is today.
See, Jackie, and I totally agree with you, and that's the approach I take with my interactions as well. But I feel that it's just so difficult because in the space, and maybe I'm just short-sighted here. Maybe what I'm viewing with the people on Twitter, on Instagram, or what have you, isn't the real representation of themselves, which is another thing to get into, right? Because so this is something I've talked about. When you're even talking to someone on, let's say, something like Instagram or Twitter of that sort, you're talking to their avatar. You aren't talking to them. So even with the messages you do get from that particular person or the stories they put up or what have you, you then go onto their profile and say, Acha, this is his lifestyle, this is whatever. So you sort of appropriate even the messages and whatever that individual is sending through the profile he or she has set out on the internet, which may not always even be representative of the individual as such. And people often also get away with saying a bunch of things on the internet which they would never say in person. So that's another thing to get into, that even though we value, and I think there would be many people who think like us, that they would, even though there are differences in political opinion or what have you, they would still come together in sense of still, yeah, agreeing to disagree. But I just feel that I don't know, man. I don't know if all of society thinks in that manner.
They don't. And that's the thing. And that's the problem. See, I think all of us are very thoda bahut obsessed with social media ka, you know, like making that curated hyper woke daddy image for ourselves, right? At least in my circles, there are other people, but in some way or the other, everyone wants this curated, nice image of themselves that they want to project, or like a certain self-image that they have that they want to become a reality in some way on social media. And a lot of people are very successful in doing that, and you know, credit to them. So yeah, I think social media is powerful in that sense, that it has that power over us. And a lot of people do sort of judge you by your follow accounts, or the kind of opinions you have, how many like woke publications have like quote tweeted your tweet and all of that. And that's okay, but I just don't like to feel like that's the all consuming end of our work. And like us, there's a lot more to us than that. And these echo chambers eventually, like an HR manager, if he's interviewing you for a job, he's not going to add zeros to your salary if he knows that you have a certain kind of inkling on social media, unless that is your job, in which case maybe.
But Jackie, don't you feel that and maybe you're in a better position to comment here, but don't you feel in the corporate space, especially in tier 1 cities, I would say, in the Mumbais and Delhis of your world, these HR managers are sort of being told to go through your social media platforms and see if you are in contention of a job, perhaps at a corporate or what have you, like very much in line with how the West has gone in terms of seeing the particular individual that they're possibly interviewing and those sorts of things, and then channeling that, Acha, is this a particular person that we want to hand an interview to or whatever. So even though they may keep an open head in terms of even if they disagree with some things that particular individual has said, they still give them an interview, but that's still in their head, right? That's still in the HR manager's head as much as possible. So when that particular individual then turns up for an interview, that HR manager already knows his history and he knows what sort of things that particular individual likes to associate with. So, but perhaps that's inevitable. But perhaps that's inevitable with the world we're living in right now.
Yeah. See, this practice of HR managers or any kind of vetting that happens was always prevalent. I think like this goes back all the way to like in arranged marriages, they used to have like detectives, who would creep on the other candidate to find out, is things. And now it's just like they vet you, they do a social media scan, so to speak. And I think if you're smart, you don't want to put something out there that's extremely offending anyway. Like forget, not just for this reason, but like the misuse of free speech, I think, can sometimes get people in trouble. And they might even mean well, but in today's day and age, things just get construed in certain ways. Yeah, that you won't even imagine it. Like you won't even think that someone could take it this way, but they do. And I personally have also had to privilege check myself a lot of times with things I've said on Twitter, or something that some kind of messaging that I send out in a script, because these things get millions of views, and then someone can just like point something out in the comments, and we are all very cognizant of what we're putting out there. So the HR manager thing, I think, was inevitable. Like you said, they will vet you for what you've put on social media and all of that. But that'll be a be all end all. I think like it's not going to be that it's going to affect. It might affect your chances of getting the job altogether. Yes. But not so much that they will give you a better position because you're saying things that align with them. It's more likely that it'll be a deal breaker. So just be careful what you say, be empathetic online. Make an anon if you want to. I mean, a lot of people do that. They make Finstas or like fake Twitter avatars and just go on. And yeah, nobody, like a lot of people I know, okay, who are in like corporate jobs and all of that, they don't have, like if they're making a Twitter, they most likely make an anonymous one with some avatar, like, cowboy doctor or something like that. And they'll just spew whatever opinions they have and then sit back and chill. There are very few who actually will go ahead and put their own personal brand out there. And those people have more to lose, like myself.
Yeah, so like I would fall in the category, and maybe I'm being naive here in saying that whatever your opinions are, I would still voice it out there. I mean, it's easy for me to say right now. I don't have anyone to feed. I mean, most of the things are taken care of. But I don't know. Maybe I would want to sort of live in a society where that is propagated. So, and I can sort of even make distinctions with, let's say, the heads at social media companies. So, like, I really respect Jack Dorsey. Whatever Twitter is doing, some people may not agree with it, and even he doesn't agree with sort of the things that the executives are doing there at Twitter. So he says that even though you may think that I'm the face of Twitter as such, there are several of these things that go ahead that I don't really have full autonomy on controlling. So he often says that he wants a Wild West Twitter in that sense, where people can sort of just go there and voice whatever they want to voice. It doesn't matter however much radical you and I may think it is. But yeah, man, that's just something that I like. What do you think? That do you feel that there will come a point where people, because the manner in which I think about it, and this was sort of the inspiration I had in starting off a podcast as well, is because I sort of got really frustrated with the traditional media, because I really feel, and I've mentioned this so many times that people are already bored, is the fact that all any of the platforms, be it NDTV, Republic, any of these platforms, newspaper publications, media channels, they sort of have a narrative to feed, however much they may say that they aren't, if that makes sense. And that's not only speaking in India, that's worldwide. That's your CNN, that's your MSNBC, that's your Fox. Yeah, so that's the whole thing, right? So, but do you feel, I feel that there will come a point where people will sort of get frustrated with those sorts of traditional media outlets and will move away from them. I mean, that's why I think social media, things like Twitter, things like Instagram, sort of started to propel. Even then, maybe these echo chambers started to form, but that was slightly later on. But I think that's another reason why podcasts and those sorts of things are doing really well, because it's honest conversation as much as possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I totally get what you mean, man. In terms of, like, I don't trust any news publications myself. Like, there are maybe a handful, like one or two, that I will maybe just read and be like, "Ye such ho sakta hai," because on both ends, like on the extreme left spectrum or the right spectrum, there's propaganda. I think there's certain goals that they want to fulfill, and I think at this point most people, unless they're really daft, have realized this. They realize कि अगर OP India कुछ डाल रहा है, तो chances are it is not going to
Be woke.
it is not translating as much to I am spreading news. It is spreading a narrative. So I think people get that. And though about Twitter and Instagram being the right spaces, so to speak, that have transparency, even that I don't know, because
same.
The kind of propagandaists, lack of a better term, have pervased, like they've kind of seeped into that sphere also. Social media, there are always trolls on both sides who are going to come at you. Which is why I personally think that I don't know what the future holds in terms of trustworthy media sources, but I would say that I don't know what the future holds, honestly. Like I just know that right now I'm very dejected and removed, and I argue with my uncle or my mom all the time because they read like papers, right? And first of all, they will tell me the news that was trending on Twitter the previous day, okay, which is slow as is, or like, and at the same time, they'll like that whole SSR water conspiracy. Still after so many freaking today, in fact, I'm supposed to. So we're doing a video on this channel that I host for. It's called Hot Dang, and it's about like news anchor fails and just the kind of really stupid things that these people like the lady who read the WhatsApp chats, like she was focusing on Riya Chakravarti typing "I'm a bounce," right? She's written "I'm a bounce," and this is on national TV, okay, on her channel.
They're deconstructing it.
Yeah, like she says "I'm a bounce." क्या Riya check bounce की बात कर रही थी? I'm like, I'm a bounce, and she didn't say Amma. She said Ima bounce. I am a bounce. I'm like, oh my god, this is the representation of the cultural divide. Not even cultural divide, like age gap, everything. It is just such a mix of everything wrong with this country, because the boomers don't want to take an effort to understand millennials. Millennials feel they're too cool to interact with Gen Zs. हर 3 साल के age gap में, I feel like we have a generation gap. And that was like this, when talking to my uncle or my mom was so frustrating because they were like, we don't know, but Riya ne kiya hoga. I was like, just like they are making you like what was that whole thing? It was the media using Indians in lockdown one and like preying on their most basic toxic instinct, which is like always otherize the woman in such a case, which is a very sad part of our society. They can never, like if a guy goes off and, offs himself the way he did, which was proven, and they want a scapegoat. And if it's a woman, they find all the more like vile, really toxic energy directed towards them. Again, this is just my take on it. I'm not saying this is the truth, but I mean, it just seems more believable to me that this is what's happened, and the media just really made a circus out of it, dude. Like,
Yeah.
God.
See, I think you touched upon it in the sense that, and I've mentioned this previously as well. Like, I don't as much care about what the people think in terms of what opinions they hold. My major concern is when, as you said, if they aren't speaking to each other. So if, let's say, there's a woke 17-year-old girl on Instagram, she's not, and she believes that acha, the whole system is corrupt, so everything has to be ripped apart or whatever. She's playing the same game as the 60-year-old BJP supporting uncle who's saying that, yeah, these new people don't know anything about the establishment, this, that, whatever. So what's even the point talking to them? So in my estimation, however we may see them, it's the same in my opinion, because they aren't speaking to each other, they aren't making progress, and if you can't hold conversation, then what? Yeah, that's where you sort of have these things propel up. And even with the news, let's say, because even I have a really hard time getting news in that sense. So what the approach I've sort of taken is that, and this may not be the best, but I've sort of tracked, I don't even know if the word is right, but I sort of respect a few news I respect a few journalists, and I've seen their work over the years, and those are the people I sort of respect, and those are the people I go to. I know this may not be the best way of going about things, but like, I don't know, maybe it's just better than consuming it through the media channel. So I have it for an Indian context and like an Indian politics context. I have it for like a US context and all those sorts of things. And maybe that is the future. Maybe people will have their icons, they'll have their journalists, they'll have their public intellectuals who they sort of go to, and they don't rely on the algorithm as such. Maybe it may take a while, but perhaps that's the way things will go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, man, they could, but I'll tell you one thing. Like, it's not like you're completely right. It's not the same with Indian media. It's the international media as well. I remember, so I was in the US for 3.5 years, uh, and while I was there, like my whole idea, like before I went there, I had this great, like, oh my God, land of liberty and this and that. But वहाँ पे भी है, like there's bigoted news channels, and we see it here also. There's Fox, and I just thought that might be a small spectrum. But even in a place like California, where I was, there were people who would just be like, Obama should go. And this was around the time like Trump and him were like sparring, right? And Obama was still president, but I never thought they'd make Trump president. Like, but that was just such a, like, everyone was just like, fuck, America's really showed its true colors. And that's the thing. Like, I think news outlets had a big part to play in that. I think not just news outlets, but like social media, news, the whole mixed bag of like information that we consume, right? Which is very algorithm specific. It is very, it feeds you the kind of toxicity almost that that they know that you will consume and be like fueled by, and will further your stance more on otherizing the other side. There's no communication like that we have with each other anymore. It's all through like the two sides being the left and the right. Or like the two TGs that you mentioned, like the 17-year-old girl or the 60-year-old guy, they will probably not talk about politics. Even if they are granddaughter and like grandfather, they'll just be like, हाँ ये boomer है, मैं इनसे बात नहीं करना चाहती. There's very little like attempt to make people change, like, and because it gets awkward. Like, even with my uncle, I've tried, like he's proper, like, so the other day, okay, I was sitting was dude, like I was sitting with him, and I love the guy to death. Okay, he's like a dad to me, and I was just talking to him about like, look what they've done in UP or something about Yogi, okay, which I spewed off on Twitter that he's not handling the situation well, and he's corrupt, and look at what he's done. And And he's like, but he'll be the next PM. I'm like, you want this man to be the PM? Like what has he done? He's like, what do you mean? What has he done? He's put so many Muslims in jail, like in UP, he's the reason why all the Muslim criminals are in jail. I'm like, is that qualification enough to become a prime minister? And he's like, dude, if it wasn't for him and Amit Shah and Modi, and like my family business is in real estate. Okay. So we rent out flats and stuff around Bombay to certain tenants. And he said, all those flats of yours, na, wahan pe ghus jate the ye log. All the Muslims would have come and taken over it. And I'm like, you have completely, there are so many problems in that statement that I'm not even going to dignify it with a response. But this is what we're dealing with, right? Like if I just sit with him and I want to sit with him and actually ask him that, one, what is your issue with these people? Tell me any past experiences, because maybe I've not had those. Maybe that has molded your opinion on them a certain way. My best friend is Muslim, and I find it so awkward because in that same group that we're in, like 6 guys, 3 of them are Sanghis. Okay. He's Muslim. Another Catholic is there. And I am the only like liberal, like left leaning. I'll post like anti-government stuff. And it's just so, I don't know. Was it this hateful before 2014? Were we so divided?
I don't know, man. Like people say that it's more divided than it's ever been. And that's also possibly plays into the hands of the establishment, because Amit Shah has often talked about this aspect several times. Like I think he has this famous quote saying that it doesn't matter if it's true or not, we'll find a way to spread it. So I mean, it just speaks in sense that it sort of doesn't even and it links to so many of these social media aspects also. Like I was listening to this person saying that, and he had this really cool thing to say. He said that truth will never take like lies will always be propelled faster than truths, because it's exciting, because it's there's something you can react to. Yeah. So possibly that's the thing, man. Like, yeah.
True. I think that the like lies and rumor mongering, and like again I keep coming back to the SSR thing, because they play on our preconditioned toxicity, or like preconditioned very like patriarchal mindset in the Ria case, at least, where like I think what all most like right-wing uncles did, right, in the entire lockdown, the first one was they sat at home and they drank whiskey at night and they ate chicken tikka, okay, and they were like, ha, ye Ria ko jail mein dalo. That's it. That's all they did. Like I don't think they did much more. Actually, that's not true. That's not true. I think some of them might have had paneer tikka. Some of them. I don't know. But dude, like it's scary, man. Like it is very like the hypocrisy of Indian uncles really scares me a lot of times, because like I'm sure you have these uncles also, right?
Yeah,
Who say like Rihanna ne kaise bola hamare farmers protest ke bare mein, right? Like why is she butting into our business, which is so hypocritical, because you're an Indian uncle. Okay, all you do is ask us like, beta shadi kab kar rahe ho, salary kitni kamate ho, and all of that, and you're worried that Rihanna has spoken about the farmers protest. Like, it's just convenient narratives and this and that. And then Kangna came out and said she got paid like 100 crores or something for that tweet, right? 100 crores, 18 crores, something like that. Which is I don't know what's lies and what's truth anymore.
Yeah, that's
everything seems like a show. Like the news has not seemed like the news for a very long time. I don't trust any of those anchors. I think there's like, call me a cynic, dude, but I have no faith. I'm just like, main paisa kamayega. I'll like transition into like a better paying role in a couple of years, and then I'll just shelter myself from all this toxicity, live in a bubble, which is most, and I know this is a very privileged urban elite kind of mindset, but honestly, it's just daldal hai yaar, the rest of it. Like the more you think about it, and as artists and creatives, we're really inclined to think a lot and like feel a lot, right? I honestly feel like part of me has checked out of that whole thing after 2018, 2019. Like it's just like everything sucks, and you know, if you can save yourself, or like save your near and dear ones, or like make a life for yourself which is unaffected by all this, again, I'm very aware of how privileged this sounds, but that has been my goal lately. Like it's really just been, get that bag, okay, and like make your life such कि ये सब चीजें से तुमको problem ही नहीं पड़ता, because मैं थक गया हूँ यार. Like I have a lot of empathy, and I have a lot of like sympathy for people who are suffering because of this. But at the end of the day, if you keep empathizing, right, it's a good thing, and you act and you try to donate and this and that. After a certain point, even you ask yourself, is it enough? Like, am I enough? Am I doing enough? Or should I be focusing more on getting in a better position in my life and then seeing if I can help? Because like I started taking therapy last year in May, mainly because I also think I just like the pandemic was a big part, but also like just the surroundings, man. You feel very hopeless. You don't feel cared for in this country. Like the numbers, the kind of negligence on the part of people in power, the kind of who done it that they weave, right? When something happens, like they arrested people who've tweeted against the government's reaction to the COVID crisis. They've like a lot of other things. Like they just denied responsibility and at the same time played the blame game. And at the same time, I just feel like people were dying and all they cared about was West Bengal. And sadly, I also know that people like my uncle will still vote this government into power. So yeah, I've sort of given up.
So there are a few things here. I think obviously I'm not going to take away anything from the polarized situation that we are living in. That's anyone can see that, no one's so blind. But the thing is, I also feel that the lockdown really has something to play with it, because as you mentioned, people really have a lot of time on their hands, and they were spending it on social media and these sorts of things,
Yeah.
and simply reacting to things a lot more than they previously would have, if that makes sense. So I had this good friend of mine, and he talked about the whole George Floyd thing. And so he
Hmm.
had a very interesting take, and I've been thinking about this recently. He said that if you practically look at it, there are, and he's taking nothing away. He's obviously considering that this is a big atrocity and something that we should guard against. Like obviously, racism shouldn't have a place and all those sorts of things. But he says that many of these instances happen almost every single year, every single month in the USA. Then why particularly this instance, and why particularly during this time? And he particularly said that, and he doesn't want to sound conservative, or he doesn't want to sound that he doesn't care for what happened particularly, but he said that people had a lot more time on their hands, and it almost became like there were so many things that were piling up, and this almost became the thing that, acha, this is the one where we're going to take a
All the
stance on,
outrage just sort of focused
channeled
on that.
into
Like,
one particular thing.
yeah, I partly agree with this, because I think that like SSR was that for us, the collective frustration of the country just coming out every night, like either through wanting a distraction
Mm.
or wanting some form of sick entertainment. Um, Sadly, I think we used that joblessness in a much more toxic way than the US. At least the US used it. They used their Velapanthi to protest and raise a voice for something. What did we yeah, there was mainly the SSR thing. And what else happened in the lockdown last year? Like, I don't know. And the first wave here was like, I think it hit us properly, I think around May only, like May, June to September was when things were bad. Um, and yeah, I can't remember much other news from that entire cycle
Mm.
apart from SSR, and it was frankly a little disturbing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that in itself is not a good place to be in, where sort of people are using news as entertainment as such. People almost put it on because acha dekhte hain aaj kya hoga, what does he say today, and so it's almost playing on the theatrics. And I was recently having this conversation with a mentor of mine. I don't know if I'm going to name him, because I don't know, I haven't asked him as such, but he was talking about this aspect that we should sort of move away from using theatrics in our speech and those sorts of things, because he says that um it's almost like going back to the Stone Age, because he says that, and he's a good orator as such. He says that whenever he's having all these meetings with business professionals and those sorts of things, because of the manner he can orate, because in the manner he goes about his speech, several of the people, whenever he's completed talking, and then he says that, "Acha, did you understand what I was trying to lay out?" And this, that. He said, "But nahi, but sun ke bahut acha laga. This was really good to hear you," or something of that sort. So the point of the matter is, ki, he says that people should start talking in a monotonous manner, because then the content of your speech will start to matter, and it's not so much about the theatrics of it and how you sort of play around with it. And I've really been thinking about this, because historically there have been so many of these great leaders who've been so charismatic. I'm not going to take that away from him, that you almost get lost in that charisma. So there have been several historians who've written about, because I don't know, see, they've said that they don't know what it's like to be face to face, one on one with Hitler in a room, and there's no one else there. Like, it's, people have said that the people who have sort of experienced that, it's, you sort of just get lost in possession of that particular individual because of how charismatic they are. And I think there's something to that, man. And even if we aren't speaking to them one to one right now, even through portals like the media, I think it's so powerful in in buying into ideologies which we should sort of stay away from, be it on any side, really.
Right. Okay, I partly agree, because one, that it's, your mentor has a very good problem, dude. कि मैं इतना ज़्यादा charismatic है कि लोग मेरा कोई भी point ऐसा seriously ले लेते हैं. I would love to have that problem, but I don't think that's fully true. I think, like, as charismatic as someone is, okay, you can say certain things. It's not a bad thing to have that power, but I would like to think society in its entirety has moved on from just charisma being a substitute for metal, or like for having some actual for having actual like smarts or like intellect. I don't think that's the case anymore. I mean, even though, like, there are charismatic leaders and all of that, charisma is, yes, one big part of it. Like, you can have a cult and all of that, but at the end of the day, if you're not delivering results, right, then whose fault is it? Is it your fault for being charismatic and duping these people, or is it the people who need to not be so naive, right? So, I mean, if his solution is to be taken into account, everyone should talk like this and not, I should not have any feelings and just tell you what. So mail पे बोल दो ना सब कुछ, पूरी दुनिया को, like, send a memo or send a text. The reason why charisma works, because it's human. It makes you human. The way you talk, the way you communicate, the way you put across a point with empathy. If you cry on national television, for some reason, people buy into that, which is sad, because it also means that there's a big education problem, and people are naive and they just trust easily. But is it the person's problem who's charismatic? No, they are they're getting the bag. Like, they are literally doing that. It makes them horrible people, but you can't blame them alone. You also have to blame your own lack of foresight, and realizing that, yeah, it's a snake. That's a snake. That's a charismatic snake. You need to be able to tell yourself that, or gauge that. And as long as, I'm a big believer in, like, just educate yourself no matter the means. And yeah, I think after you've been bitten by a snake 6 times, you have to understand that abhi charm nahi chalne wala hai iska. You have to tell yourself that you have to stop going back to the snake to get bitten. The snake won't stop. That is its instinct.
But do you feel that, and I do agree with you, but do you feel that sometimes, even if you've sort of had that in the past, you just can't move away from it because it's so encompassing? Like, I don't know how to explain it, because there's so many examples that come to my mind as well. Obviously, I talked about Hitler. I mean, that's such a famous one. But I was recently reading this book, Jugalbandi by Vinay Sitapati. I would recommend it to anybody. The BJP before Modi. It's a good read.
Nice.
So he talks about this aspect that, and the core emphasis of this particular book is the relationship between Advani and Atalji. Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And he says that he could write, in his opinion, a good biography of Atalji is because he didn't get the time to spend time with him. Because he said that in the literature he's read on Atalji and the people who have covered him, they've said that whenever they've had interactions with him, it's almost been like they've become fanboys as such, because Atalji was such a good orator, and people who spent time with him just got enamored by him. Because, and there's this particular instance which I would like to talk about. So there was this journalist who'd gone to interview him about some policy things that had come up when he was in charge. And he said that, so he asked this particular question, the journalist, and Atalji is like, हाँ, we'll come to that, but तुम एक बार ये सुनो, ये बारिश नहीं हो रही, ये देखो खिड़की से कितना सुंदर नजारा है ये वो. So it's almost very different to how any politician would do it. It's so romantic. It plays so much to the emotion that sometimes even the most rational of people will get sucked into it to say that acha ha whatever. Even if they came in with a set of questions, they will possibly forget it, and they'll cover his story. And that's what the most successful people do, right?
Look, see, having a gift of the gab and like being good with words, especially things like this, like the snowflakey types who like बहुत serious conversation चल रहा है, and you just suddenly go like, क्या मस्त बारिश हो रही है. Do we ever stop to think what this life is? I do that when, like, in relationships, if I've fucked up and my girlfriend's gonna call me out, okay, I will. That's the kind of tactic I'd use. कि क्या सुंदर नजारा है. Chalo na, let's just cozy up. She's like, but no, you fucker, like you're doing this behind my back or something. Generally, I always look at that as, I wouldn't go as far as saying it's always an admission of guilt. Some people are just naturally charismatic. No hate, that's fine. Just look at me. No, but I just feel like it's wrong to blame only that person and how good an orator they are. It's also they manipulating you and you not realizing it. Like it really comes down to you having the wherewithal to spot who's being nice to you. People shouldn't be so naive, in my opinion. Again, this could be coming from a place of privilege or whatever, but just learn to be a little better judge of character, which I feel like half this country doesn't have. They just look at certain qualities in people and they buy into their whole facade कि यार नहीं यार ये तो आदमी एकदम salt of the earth, बिल्कुल हमारे साथ तो ऐसा कर ही नहीं सकते ये हम, like, and it's easy यार. It's sad. This country is very easy to sway. We are emotional people. I work in a space where I make feel good, sweet, emotional videos.
Yeah.
And I see the numbers on that, and I understand that emotional appeal is a huge thing in India. It's a huge thing in India, and this is not funny or anything. It's a very good thing. Deep inside, everyone in India, I think, has a very bound to earth, family value, warm, wanting love kind of thing. I don't think we are inherently capitalistic as a society. We don't think in very libertarian ways. We don't. Our instinct is never to question authority. Our instinct is never to be like कि मैं ये job छोड़ दूंगा because मुझे वहाँ पे better pay मिल रहा है. When I have discussed any job switch with my mom, she always brings this up to me कि but नहीं, they are not just your bosses, they are अन्नदाता type, like वैसा attitude. And I think ये attitude अच्छा है अपनी जगह, पर this is what has enabled corporate India and like really charismatic leaders and all of that to take advantage of people who are below the middle class line, because that mindset कि मैं जिंदगी भर struggle और slog करेगा मेरे मालिक के लिए, पर फिर मालिक ने उठा के 2 झापड़ मारा मेरे को, तो मैं फिर भी like I'll just be like पर मालिक का तो हक बनता है. That is the attitude that needs to change, because we glorify struggle, we glorify tragedy. We look at people with money and be like, hey, oh, like इन्होंने तो कुछ किया रहेगा. Like if I buy a car and post about it, okay, of course not in these pandemic times, say 2018, 2019, cool, like celebrate, but I feel bad because I feel like there will be 3 friends who will be like, oh, ये तो show off कर रहा है, बढ़ाई कर. मैंने मेहनत करके मेरे पैसों से गाड़ी खरीदी. Why should I feel ashamed? Why should we are inherently we put those emotions before any kind of statistical growth in our life that we can measure, which I think is a cause of a lot of problems in this country, because people don't make rational decisions because of that. And they choose the wrong authority figures without naming anyone.
Yeah, bro, even the stock market runs on emotions. So like it's not even we can even touch about other industries, but yeah. It's I mean there's so much I really wanted to get into, but coming back to what we were earlier which we were discussing earlier as such, we were talking a lot about creativity and your creative process as such. What do you think creativity is, like at its most fundamental sense? Like if I may ask a very silly question.
I think it's a mix of just a vivid imagination, um, and craving a certain level of validation and loneliness. I think it's these three things. At least for me personally, I found these to be very inciting factors. As a kid, I was an only child. I didn't have siblings. I think I was always used to getting my parents' attention, which translated into me in school kind of being, sort of lack of a better term, class clown-ish, which then translated into me knowing that, okay, I need people because I'm lonely, and people will like me if I am funny, or if I am creative, or can make them laugh or make them feel a certain way. I think so that's where validation comes in. And loneliness I already touched upon, because you're an only child and you need that. And an imagination always helps, because really, like, if you're daydreaming, and I used to daydream a lot in school, um, those daydreams can translate into stories which you can tell, which I think I try to retain still. Like, if there is something that I even think is absurd, I'll bring it up, and that's what the creative industry teaches you. There are no bad ideas. Like, you pitch an idea, it's absurd, it gets turned down. What's the worst? Like, theek hai, fine, I'll come with another idea tomorrow. So I think that's what creativity is for me.
So we were talking earlier about, let's say, the content you guys put out at FilterCopy, and some of the reactions it has countrywide, really, and how people react to that content and take to it. But and you sort of touched about right now with this aspect of stories, and I find stories to be really powerful, because that's the way we make sense of the world, in my opinion, at least.
Correct.
What do you think about stories? Like, obviously you touched about it, but just to elaborate it as such, like, how important do you think stories are in society?
I think stories are one of the most enduring mediums that there is. I mean, generations have passed by, but their stories are what remain. People come and go, but it's the stories they tell, it's the stories they live that sort of go. But when you say stories, can you be more specific? Do you mean like scripts or?
So there's this historian Yuval Noah Harari. He obviously has this very famous book called *Sapiens*. So he goes into detail a lot about this aspect of that everything that there is, even corporations, even money, all these are sort of ideas or stories that we tell ourselves. If that makes sense, like there is no physical Google, there is no physical wealth as such. These are constructs. These are abstracts. These are abstract things that we've made, stories that we've created over time, which have propelled, and we've seen societies do well under these systems, and then we've sort of buyed into that. Religions, in the more core essence, like mythology and those sorts of things, are stories, right? Those are stories that have propelled over time, and because they make sense, give us a sense of meaning in our lives, is the reason that they still are here, right? So in that particular manner, I guess.
Yeah, dude, like, all things can sort of be put in that mold of stories, like H.P. Lovecraft's, like, Cthulhu, all of that. Like, a friend of mine, like my best friend Pixie, he also told me about Sapiens, and I'm aware of this sort of philosophy. I don't know if I completely buy into it, though. I don't think everything is stories. I mean, a lot of things are just tangible reality. Like, मैं कल उठ के मेरा मकान मालिक मेरे को पूछेगा कि रेंट किधर है, मैं बोलेगा रेंट इज अ स्टोरी, रेंट इज अ कॉन्स्ट्रक्ट. तो वो उठा के चप्पल मारेगा मेरे को. So I don't think everything is story. I think stories are very powerful. I think telling stories is a very important thing for a culture to grow. to learn from stories, to learn from history. I think history and stories, fiction have a very, if you use it correctly, like I actually want to develop like a series when I stop like, writing short format. I want to write like a long format series on just like a historic fiction kind of thing, maybe on like tribes in Maharashtra back in like the 18th century, and give it like a Red Dead Redemption kind of spin. Um, because I think that's fun to me. Like, growing up, if someone told me I could tell stories for a living, I would be like, fuck yeah, dude. Like, of course I will and get paid bank for it. Yes, please. So yeah, like I like reminding myself that every now and then that, I am in a space that I'm I feel very blessed to be doing what I'm doing, to be able to tell the stories I'm getting to tell. Sure, there are limitations. Sure, like the stories we tell don't always translate the way we expected them to. But when they do, and when they hit a nerve, like I still get messages for awkward situations your boyfriend put you in, or like I've done a lot at Array. We do a lot with actors. So I've done this with Kartik, Aaryan, and Kriti, Sanon. Like when your parents catch you in a live-in, I still get messages saying that these videos I still rewatch them when I'm in a bad space, or like um, just tons of them, like Rajkumar Rao's stuff, and it blows my mind that something that I sat on this table or like my office table when it was there and just thought of and ran by maybe one writer saying ki ye funny hai kya, and put it there, and then a writer said, and then an actor said those dialogues that just came out of my head, and that makes someone smile and happy. It's powerful, man. I think that is the power of stories. Like that, some kid who grew up in Ville Parle, Bombay, can conjure up a script which an actor from another part of the country will narrate and say and act out, and a director from somewhere else will direct, and some complete other person in like some NRI in Canada will watch it and feel better about being away from home. Fuck yeah, dude. Like that is the power of stories.
The question I was trying to say was that is that sort of the inspiration, and like how does it sort of feel, because you have touched about it in that sense, but to see something that is very very abstract, something that comes out of your head, something you worked on, and then you see that in a physical space, be it
Right.
in a video, but be it people who are actually acting that stuff out, or even yeah man, like just people feeling happy watching the content. Like is that what keeps driving you, like writing stories every day, thinking about topic areas and those sorts of things?
Yeah, it's a big part of the motivation. Yes, I love that part of the job. It's not all I can think about, sadly, because I also have like a team to run, a channel to run, revenue to bring in, and at the end of the day, my own personal growth, where I'm going career wise. I want to get certain numbers. So it's a combination of those things. But yes, I'd say making people feel like, hey, this is shit, this is me, or like, oh my god, like I missed doing this, or this was my ex and me, like just making them feel that is pretty much like close to the top of the priority list. First is obviously getting paid. No, but no, it's I think it's probably the most important. Definitely.
So with the things you do come up with, are they just abstract figments of your imagination, or are there also inspirations you've taken from your own life, perhaps with relationships you've been in, or the world you see around you, things
A
like that?
lot of it is stuff like from my own life, because I remember the last scene of awkward situations with your boyfriend, which ended up getting some, I think it's at 22 million or something now. The last scene has him like playing with the racket, like the machhar ka racket se wo maar raha hai while she's sleeping. And that literally was exactly verbatim what happened with my girlfriend and me at the time. Like we were in a hotel room, and for some reason I carried my that machhar ka racket, and she was just appalled by it. And yeah, like there's a lot of these instances in a lot of videos that I think I've gone on to add. Even the 4 a.m. conversations thing is something similar to what um, happened with me in the past. And yeah, man, I feel like as a writer, right? When my first boss told me this, he was in advertising. He said that you need to live to write. Like you need to really experience things to truly like write emotional stuff. And if you haven't, like you can tell when it's inorganic. Like, and I know writers without taking their names who, because they've lived a very sheltered, not, I wouldn't call it sheltered also, I'll call it plain vanilla type life, which is good. But because of that, sadly, even though they are excellent writers, okay, they understand everything, textbook, like, scene structure, all of that better than I ever could. Okay, they understand conflict, they understand all of that, but they can't get human emotion out, because I think that comes from a place of living it, at least for me. And I had no role, like I did one minor at UCLA in screenwriting. Okay, otherwise all my writing, like I've not read tons of screenwriting books. In fact, when someone tells me how many screenwriting books have you read or something, I immediately judge them. I'm like, because you can't learn that from screenwriting books. You can learn the science of it, you can, but you're not going to be like a writer. You'll be someone who has the knowledge of screenwriting. So yeah, I do use a lot of my own lived experiences in my scripts, and I'm not saying that is the only part. I know successful writers who don't necessarily do that, but it works for me.
Do you feel it helps you give this more essence to the thing you're putting out? Because I've sort of so there was this interview, this podcast conversation rather, I was listening to this young writer. I think her name is Simar Malhotra. She writes fiction. So she says that she did some course, I'm forgetting where, I think Yale or somewhere, where she had this creative writing professor who talked about this aspect that when you're writing a particular thing, you sort of have to put the reader in a context where he can sort of feel what's happening there. So if you're describing a room that your protagonist walks in, they can feel the breeze. Like you've described those things as well. It's not simply about if he's getting from place point A to point B. And I think it links very much into living things out, because I'm a big fan of Dostoevsky, and I think he's one of the best writers out there. And I think he spent 4 years in a Siberian prison cell, and it sort of shows in his writing as well, because I don't think anyone else could have written that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And obviously it is his craft, he's a brilliant writer, not going to take that away from him, but it also comes down to just things. And it's not only writers. I've seen songwriters, musicians also do this. So I think whatever you may make of Honey Singh's music, I think he mentioned that when he was preparing for Lungi Dance, he'd spent 3 or 4 months at Chennai, at one of the small villages around Chennai, just getting a feel of what's happening, just getting a feel of the scenarios around him. And that really helped him come up with the song, come up with the lyrics, come up with whatever. So I don't know, maybe it's sort of different for perhaps a medium like books compared to a visual medium as such. But what do you have to say? Because I still feel that the relatability is still there on video platforms as well, right?
Yeah. So I started off writing text. My first job was when I was 19. I started writing film reviews for Book My Show, and then I started writing for AOL India. And even when I was at Array, I used to actively write pop culture pieces on Array's website. So I've always had a like sort of background in text writing. And even when I used to write text, I was a very firm believer in painting a word picture, which is literally what you said, which is like building a universe, like really pulling in the reader, or now in the case of my scripts, the viewer, into what they are walking into. Because now suppose Sanjay in bracket 24 walks into a room which is dimly lit, has fairy lights in the background, akin to like a frat boy. Okay, like that's stuff that if you read Quentin Tarantino scripts, right? Like he writes literally like we're talking. He'll like the opening of, I think, Inglorious, no, not Inglorious. I think it's the what eight, the Hateful Eight, right? The Hateful Eight, like the opening lines are literally like something about like we see a snow, a snow-covered mountain and a man walking through it. The kind of snow that you wouldn't see in California or in like it's just so like there's flow, right? And I think that's what I also try to do. And what Simran, you said?
I think I'm forgetting her name, but I think it's Simar Malhotra, I think.
Simar Malhotra. Okay, so what Simar's saying is also very true, because like that's something that's important as a writer. When you're writing your action lines as a screenwriter, you want to get the director and the actors know the feel of like what you visualize, right? What you have thought when you've written it down. And same with, and I think that translates even more for writing text. Like if
Yeah.
I'm writing a piece about, the importance of cuddling in a relationship, suppose, okay, like an op-ed piece, it has to be visual. It has to be, you have to talk about the lingering of fingers under a sheet, or like you have to talk about how the texture of someone's hair feels against your fingers, and really immerse the reader, which is, I would say, in fact, it's like that doesn't always help you in writing scripts, because it's very dependent on the director when you write a script, because the director is that medium between you and the actors. And if you sit with the director and give him the understanding, then it will translate, yes. But with text, it's very direct. It's writer to reader. That's it. There is no extra medium in the middle. So I think it's more important writing text to paint a word picture. But if you can do it with your scripts also, nothing like it.
Yeah, that was sort of my follow-up question, because there are a few writers who said that they were also quite interested in film, but they said that they
Hmm.
didn't really want to go into it because they were really possessive about their stuff. So they said that
Hmm.
with books, with things like that, with plays, with poems,
Yeah.
whatever, they have a lot more control over their text because it's their piece. Like there's no one else external who's going to sort of change it up. A producer they have to cater to, a director, what have you. Like
Hmm.
what's that relationship, right? Because you've worked on these pieces, you worked on these scripts, you worked on these places where you have directors, you have producers working with you, and who sort of, however much you may like it or not, mold pieces, right? And even actors for that matter, with dialogues that they may be presented with. Sometimes I've heard several actors, and you're probably in a better space to comment here, who change it from time to time on as to how the scene's feeling, and those sorts of things. So like how is that relationship? Like, is that, are you frustrated seeing some of your work cut out, or are you happy to see that, let's say, it's a better product has come out or whatever?
Hmm. That's a very good question. And so I think with writing for text, there is a medium. I'll contradict what I said earlier. There's the editor who generally will like edit your piece or like give you some feedback and all of that. But like at the end, what goes out, you have a good understanding of ki yahi hoga, and people can now read it. With when I've written a script, and a lot of times I narrate. Okay, so I have to narrate to the actor or the director. And when I'm narrating, I always enact the scene. It'll always be like, um, Shraddha, uh, Shraddha looks over at her boyfriend, and she's about to break down. He kind of understands, and like when I'm reading these out, when I even narrate the dialogue, ki, इसमें कोई बड़ी बात क्या थी, मुझे फोन पे बता दी थी, types, that emotion I try to convey. A lot of times what happens is, and with like, so we worked with KK Menon when I was at Array in one of the shoots, and he was one of those actors who I gave a narration to, but after that he said, okay, abhi mujhe aage kuch mat bolo, let me gestate on this. And then when we called action and he played that role, which was a detective role, he brought his own flair to everything I was saying. It was nothing like how I narrated it, but he added nuance. And then post calling cut, he even told me that this is how I wanted to play it out, and this is why I did it the way I did. So when they do that, and when the director and the writer and everyone is in the know, not so much the writer because I just happen to be on set. Most times writers are not on set. Um, it's good when you have justification for it. Most times I end up watching my work, like after I've written the script, someone directs it and I see the first cut and I give my feedback. I have a narration with the actor, but I can only see their work. I can't on set tell them what they've done. But sometimes I've seen some actors play it up differently, which almost 90% of the time is a good thing. Like Vidya Balan ke saath humne kiya tha. My first script was called Naughty Talking with Vidya Balan. Okay, where the whole concept was she can make anything sexy. So she would look in the camera and just say things like, next station, Dadar, and honestly, I can't do it half as well as she does, even with narration. So that, like, the hope was she did. And what hope? Like, it's Vidya Balan, right? Like, when she walked into the room, we were all like, oh my God, she's amazing. And she nailed it, like with everything she did. And lots of Rajkumar Rao ke saath 4 scripts kiye yaar, like 4 narrations. By the 3rd script, I think we understood each other's rhythms also. And that man loves to improvise. He's actually so good at comedy. Him, Boman Irani, my God, like um, Kartik Aaryan was a delight. Abhishek Bachchan was really good. Like most good actors, you'll see they always they feel the words, they feel what you've written, they take how you visualized it, but most good actors will put their own spin on it, which is not a bad thing most times.
See, another thing I've sort of noticed is this aspect that often when there are books which are translated into digital, be it series, be it movies, whatever, the author doesn't get as much of a say. So, for example, if they've bought the rights to the book in terms of creating it in a digital or a movie form, the writers aren't separated from the process, because often the directors or the producers feel that what may work on text may not always work out on a video platform. And that's something one has to take into consideration as well, because there are very few authors who know that, who want to see their work on a video platform as well. So they know that how to translate their work into a video format, because like I think that's crucially important as well. Like have you thought around this particular aspect that I know we sort of touched base on it, but whenever you're writing a script, do you simply write it in terms of a script and not considering the video aspect of it, and then thinking about the video when you're completed with the script, or is the video format always inculcated in the script?
I mean, I think it's always sort of like in the back of my mind when I'm writing. I'm visualizing as well simultaneously. I think that's also because it helps me flow. Like if I'm writing a scene, if I'm writing a story rather, I'll have the beats in my head first. I'll tell myself, okay, this is the story that, guy and girl night before the wedding are contemplating whether this is a good idea. But today has been their Sangeet, and tomorrow in a few hours is their wedding conflict. And then where does that play out? Does the girl tell the guy that she thinks he's too mature, and she's worried that he'll get sick of her as being a nagging wife? What if it won't be the same as boyfriend and girlfriend? These touch points I start writing. I've at this point already I started visualizing, because I've not written the dialogues yet, but in my head I've painted a picture. And because now I've worked with a number of actors, I already start having a preference in my head of who I think can play this, and I start imagining how that person would say it. So I think visualization for me at least starts very early on in the script. Like literally at the point of conceptualizing, I start to think of how this will look and how this will play out. And then of course, while writing dialogue, always like rule of thumb, if you're getting into screenwriting, don't focus on the text or what you've written. Go back, read it aloud to yourself, read out all dialogue to yourself, see how it sounds to you, see if it sounds believable, then change it up. Do this like 5-6 times before your narration, or before you have a first draft.
As a screenwriter, as a writer in general, do you get any say in the casting process? For example, because you've thought about this script as such, do you sit down with the director and then say that, Acha, I understand that you may have full autonomy in terms of who you want to play, who do you want to play in this part, and stuff like that, but yeah, because you've sort of worked through the script as such, like, is that taken into consideration? Is there a board, or is it simply one person who takes the final call?
I mean, it's always the director's call, but many times, I feel like because I've also like been here a while now, I've started to like give recommendations. Like I think Aditya Pandey, who did the 4 a.m. thing, was brilliant. So for the next one, I have like told the director, I've told my boss, like who's the channel head, that I would like it. Like I wrote this with him in mind. Let's try to rope him in. So generally, and in cases like when I recommend actors, they're always also like the director is also on the same page. Like, हाँ यार ये मिल गया तो best है. So yeah, there is that, and I've done some directing also, like from my RA days. So I have an idea of that. Like I've dabbled in direction, even though that was my major at UCLA, like direction. But career-wise, I've not done as much as I wanted to. Like primarily, I've been a writer. So yeah. Yeah, I think I have some say personally. Writers in general, not always. I'd say it's a bit of a luxury.
So is it does one have to almost retrain themselves, because you talked about this aspect that you haven't directed in a while and you're focusing more on scripts and stuff, screenwriting as such. Does one almost have to retrain themselves? For example, can you almost now transition if you get an offer to work on a project as an assistant director, as a director even, is it easy to then transition into that project, or do you then need some time to work with people as an assistant director to then work into, because I'm not so well versed with the industry. I know many of the viewers and the listeners would be as well. So can you give us a little background about that?
Right. So I feel like, and I was talking to a friend recently who's looking to go abroad to film school, and she wanted to do a filmmaking course. I said, and she's done a lot of writing before. I said, look, you've already done some writing before. Why don't you go ahead? I wish I would have gone ahead and done a writing course, because direction, I really feel like there's a few technical things that you learn, right, which are good, like, but if you have a good AD, and a lot of people, like you'll see Clint Eastwood actually was an actor for the longest time, never an AD, and then became a director. Because if you've been around the game, if you've been around set life as an actor, or not so much a writer, but if you've seen the process as an on-set guy, um, and you have a certain understanding of one field of film, like writing, um, and you become successful in that, I think you start to understand the process of direction. And if you have a good AD by your side, a lot of first-time directors who are screenwriters, they've transitioned. Like that's why they go from writer and director. That's why it's such a common credit. Because writers can direct if they put their mind to it, and like, if they are not averse to learning. It'll be a learning curve. There'll be like a little hiccups, but it's a much smoother transition than directors who want to write. Because direction is more of a technical skill that you develop, but the more important aspect, and the best directors I've seen, टेक्निकल संभाल लेते हैं, वो देख लेते हैं कि हाँ ठीक है, ये सब हो जाएगा, फ्रेम आ जाएगा, we'll use this lens and all of that. That's something I think an AD can also take care of. But the way you work with actors, the way you translate what's on the page to on screen, I think writers, like, they can mesh to that very easily. So yeah, I think it's very common for writers to go from writer to director without even like going through the AD route. Like you can do maybe a few ADs here and there, AD gigs here and there, but it's very feasible for writers to become directors.
Yeah, I think even I know of several of these several directors who are good, really great writers. But additionally, I think there's also one, and maybe this is an anomaly, like with Rajkumar Harari, he has like a really good connection. I'm forgetting the writer who's yeah,
Abhijat Joshi.
Yeah, and he's been with him since the beginning, and they have a really good connection. So maybe that can help as well.
Oh
For
yeah.
example,
Like if you have a good collaborative relationship with a director as a writer, that's golden, man. Like because there's just trust there. And I had that at Array for a long time. Like I was there 2 years. I had that with like both the directors, both the head directors. I always knew they would get my vision. At FilterCopy, I was scared in the start, the first couple of months. Will they be able to translate my stuff? But I realized like Pallavi Kedia, who directed my first script, and Aditya and Shani and Shashank, just some brilliant directors here who are giving, they're not very like, acha, tera kaam ho gaya, like, you're done, the script is mine now. No, they always come back. They'll ask, oh, am I getting this right? Like, am I getting what this character's tonality is like, right? Okay, we are casting this one. And is there anything else you want me to know before going on set? So I think wo jab transparency rehti hai so it's much better for any script. And even as writers, I feel like a lot of writers tend to let go. And, like after they're done with the final script is approved and locked, they're like, acha, now it's their headache. I try not to do that as much. I try to check in. I try to take agency of the script, take ownership.
We were talking earlier a little bit about YouTube as a platform, and let's say of how other digital OTT platforms have come up. Like, what are your thoughts around it in general? Like, you were talking a little bit about how the YouTube consumption has decreased. with things like Netflix and all these other things which have come up. Like how do you guys at FilterCopy think about it? Do you ever think that you have to sort of compete with the digital platforms, or do you think that nahi, hum YouTube mein if we are the top dogs, then that's good enough for us for now?
Okay. Um, I can't speak for all of FilterCopy. Personally, what I feel is YouTube has become much more individual creator centric, and it has definitely moved a lot more in the non-fiction space. Because fiction, like sketches and short format, be it here or abroad, it's starting to either the interest is waning, or I think us as content providers are not pushing the mold enough for what's good, which is why people would much rather tune into like Dice Media's um, Operation MBBS or TVF's Aspirants, because it's a little more long form. It feels like a little more mature, like a mature product, a believable product. So my goal really is to bring back short format fiction for a while at least. Like that has been my goal here. Key, what are we doing? Like, because I remember being in like college in when AIB was really like hitting the right notes and thinking, fuck, this is so dope. Like they're really pushing the mold. It's short videos, but it's funny, it's punchy, it's contextual, it's relatable. And I want to share this with people. I want to be associated with these kind of content preference choice, like content choices. Um, I've not felt that in a long time. Maybe like my first initial few months here at FilterCopy, and yeah, like my first few months again at Array, when we could really push the boundaries, was when I got that like rush. Um, but YouTube, the biggest challenge is like I don't think FilterCopy or TVF compete with each other anymore. I don't think uh, there's that competition. I think we compete with the Ashish Chanslanis and the Karim Minatis of the world, who somehow we can't replicate. Like I also have a lot of love for the non-fiction format. Like I love non. I feel like there should be more like Watch Mojo type channels here, which is really like when you think about it, that's something that's lacking here. Like there are a few. There's Tired and Refused Productions. There's that guy. Who's that guy? Vedant Rusty. There's a few of these but again, they're mostly individual creators, who are in that space. I think what's really missing is like, and Pocket Aces has one channel like this, but it is non-fiction, but it's more educational. Nutshell karke hamara channel hai. Very nice, very cool videos. But somehow I don't know why we're not able to find one channel, and this is not just in Pocket Aces. This is across the Indian digital YouTube spectrum. कि एक ऐसा entity काय को नहीं आया है जहाँ पे that could be like India's answer to Watch Mojo, where you have maybe like very breezy list. Like I love watching What Culture के top 10s. I love watching Miss Mojo के top 10s. Or like we have stuff that is completely in the other end of nonfiction. We have streamers. We have like the Tanmay Bhatt. We have Karim Minatis who are doing stuff. It's funny. It's this thing, but it's not stuff like interest-based pop culture stuff. It's very कि आज ये news channel हुआ तो Tanmay Bhatt streaming करेगा, and great. Like Tanmay is a genius. Like he's really managed to capture that non-fiction market. But I don't know many who are doing that. Maybe Netflix India is. Netflix India is YouTube.
Yeah.
To some extent, I think they're finding a nice balance between non-fiction and fiction. But again, it's a 4:1 ratio. Like most of their videos are promotions of their titles, or 5 signs you are Geet from Jab Bhi Met. Yeah, like I think, yeah.
Why do you think that is though? Like, do you think that's how the medium has sort of evolved over the years? Because even thinking about myself, even like the YouTubers I watch, the content I watch on YouTube is very sort of individual content creator centric. It's their life, it's whatever they're putting out, and those sorts of things. Do you think it's, and I'm saying it because it's evolved perhaps because we're more we feel more intimate with YouTube as compared to Netflix, say, because with YouTube we know that acha, there's this person on the other end who probably has a little bit of a setup, maybe has a mic, but is probably shooting out of his iPhone or something of that sort. And we know that it's a lot more intimate than, say, on Netflix, where there's so much money that goes into it. There's so many people who sort of make these things. Is that particularly a reason, or is there something else to it?
I actually would like to hear answers on this myself, because it's something I've been trying to figure out too, because like there is individual content creator, like the vlogger, streamer content, that's definitely seen an uptick in the last year. I'm pretty sure, I'm not gone into depth, but I'm very sure there's going to be a very significant shift in brands also. Like brands, I don't think are going to go the branded content route with fiction after a while, at least in short format. They'll probably start looking, and they already do, like they go to so many individual creators and all of that. So there is something relatable. No, there is something relatable about like how you are and how I am. It's real. But at the same time, when you mix that with watching someone play a video game or talking about their life, I guess that just has more of an appeal with the YouTube Janta of today. Like Gen Z, I think is definitely more catered to that. Even in that audience insights committee that we had, and we spoke to our audience and we asked them what other content they watch. Most of the demographic between 16 to 24, they named people that I had not heard of at the time, like Simon Says or Priyal Dhuri and these guys. And again, I felt a bit like boomerish at that time. Like I was like, wow, I think of myself as pretty like, a pretty pop culture conscious 28-year-old. But like, yeah, dude, I like right now ka jo janta hai, you must be like 21, 20, like how old are you?
20, yeah.
Yeah, 20. Like, see, that's what I'm saying. Like I want to, like right now we have people at FilterCopy, the younger writers who are in this age bracket between like 20 to 24. I want to sit with them. I try to have more interactions with them, trying to understand key, how can we emulate what, it's not that we lack the resources. Okay. That is, in fact, the problem is probably we are less relatable now because we have some resources. And people are like, tum log to, like, y'all are the, we want to find a way into your YouTube watching schedule. And I've tried to pitch non-fiction ideas in FilterCopy too, but it's not that easy to make that shift because they've done fiction for so long, and it's worked brilliantly. And like there's a lot of billing every month that FilterCopy does for the company. So who knows? Yeah, maybe in the future, like at Pocket Aces, they'll finally go down that route. I hope, like, which is just like, I have a vision of a channel that's just like a bunch of streamers, like 7-8 streamers. Each of them come, once a week. It's something I should pitch to investors. I feel sometimes just go out there and say, hey, I have some content experience and maybe I'll do this. Because I really feel like that's the future. Yaar. Matlab, kitna hi, or like when your sibling is an overachiever, or like when, like you can't keep making this, like, or TVF, like, Indians at Kirana store, like, ठीक है देख लेंगे आ जाएगा million 2 million आ जाएगा brand भी आ जाएगा साथ में पर this, like, you tell me, do you want to watch such content?
See, I feel as I was mentioning, I feel more connected when it's someone who I can identify as an individual, because I feel there's less friction. And what I mean by friction is that there's less people between perhaps me and this particular YouTuber, or me and this particular Instagram. And I think that's another reason why Instagram influencers are so big. I think it's because you're almost in their lives pretty much, because you know that this is their living room. This is how they almost have their setup always. And there isn't a lot of thing that's going on. And it's the same thing. It's relatability, in my opinion. And I think that's the reason why perhaps platforms like I don't watch so much FilterCopy. Like I've seen a few viral videos here and there, but to be honest, like I haven't seen a lot of your content, like the content you guys put out. So perhaps it's that only. Perhaps it's the fact that we're more able to identify with individuals, maybe. Yeah. Whereas with FilterCopy, you guys have characters playing roles, right? So I don't know what whoever played the recent role, he may have been a boyfriend or whatever, but I don't know what he stands for. Like I don't know what he thinks outside of this. Like, I think that's another reason why people like, with the names you are throwing out, Tanmay Bhatt or Carrie Minati, because there's a thinking to them, because they think more than the content. So with the streams and things like that, they talk about other things as well, politics, issues, this, that, whatever. Dhruv Rathi, like, I think that's another reason why these people are so popular.
Yeah. And they have the luxury of being real, right? And they have the luxury of not being, there's not a company there. And in a way, I really like, even I watch a lot of their content, but because my work requires me to, I also watch a lot of fiction. But dude, I think overall, no, shayad, and I'll get into trouble probably for saying this, but I think even fiction channels will have to start looking at like Viraj, who's one of our biggest faces, right? I think he got big because of FilterCopy, but I think now people like Viraj the person a lot more, because he is relatable and he'll post about his grandmother and very wholesome stuff about his family, which is very, and that the quest to be glam or like, aspirational, like I said in the start of the thing, is seeming more and more like not worth it, because I don't know if people want to see that anymore. People want to see real people. People want to see real, actual, like, faces and lives that are not like, but there is like, but then again, okay, and again I'm contradicting myself. If something in fiction is really good, okay, and your friend shares it with you कि ये बहुत ही funny है या ये बहुत ही wholesome है, and numbers speak for themselves. Sure, we're not clocking the kind of numbers that we used to earlier, but I would like to think there's still, we can still save fiction short format. We just need to realign a little, recalibrate, and find out what it is that people want to see. Like, there are a lot of, like, we have a huge student community on FilterCopy's channel, like a huge reach with students in the 16 to 21 age, which is why, like, when we do stuff on online classes, or like my when your first crush in school or stuff, like it gets hits, it gets a lot of traction. So there is a crowd for that. I just feel like right now you can't ignore the non-fiction creators, you can't ignore the streamers, you can't ignore the vloggers. You maybe want to, even if you're thinking proactively, on your own channel, start building streamers, start building these personalities, vloggers. And Pocket Aces has that also. Like, we have an influencer marketing vertical which is called Clout, but that mainly takes actors. And I think we'd be wiser to start roping in personalities and start roping in people who are real and have a following there. And we've hired a couple of people who will be serving that purpose on FilterCopy. So I have hope for that, and hopefully they can transition from just our Instagram into YouTube. We can pivot them there. But there's some very, very talented kids, like Sanon, Soumya, Sani is another. Both with like good followings on Instagram. They have viral reels to their name. But grooming them for YouTube, and maybe, getting them attuned to that whole streamer community, taking a chunk from Tanmay Bhatt subscriber base, and seeing what we can do there. That might be plans that I pitch eventually in these meetings, because at the end of the day, I am one of the team leaders at FilterCopy, and it does fall on my shoulders to tell them that, okay, this is, like, and it's nothing that people like to hear, but that, we are maybe falling behind the curve a little bit, and we need to pivot towards what's relevant. Like, this has worked for us all this while, but along with doing this, let's also try this, which is what I'm trying to do with new formats in fiction and what we just spoke about. Like, I do feel like करना पड़ेगा यार stream, like non-fiction में तो जाना पड़ेगा थोड़ा. If not through FilterCopy, तो sister channel बना लो और देखो वहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है. पर करना तो पड़ेगा.
I think, I know you spoke a little bit about that. It's difficult for you. Obviously, you can't speak for the whole FilterCopy as such. But what are your thoughts in general, and if you've had discussions at FilterCopy as well about platforms like podcasting? because I feel that podcasting is really going to grow in India as such. And I'm not just saying it because I'm doing a podcast in that sense, but I genuinely
No.
feel with things like we were talking about as well, with the Tanmay Bhatts and Carrie Minatis of the world, even if they're doing it in short format content right now, I think
Hmm.
eventually the long format players will come in, because as you were saying as well, and I think a major reason is, I think where people sort of get something wrong is that they say that the society today has short attention spans, which I don't completely agree with. I understand, and I would say that we have short attention spans than we did previously in like previous generations, but I don't completely buy that argument, is because long form podcasting is really doing well, like in, obviously not in India, but like abroad in the West. And I've spoken to some YouTubers saying that in India, who said that generally what happens in the West, after 2 years, maybe 3 years, the same thing started happening in India. Like there was a period of time when Omegle was really big in the West, and that sort of stuff started to become big in India a few years later, and things like that. I'm not a YouTuber, so I don't know so much of the technicalities. But yeah, what do you think of the space of audio? Like, have you guys had conversations at FilterCopy, and perhaps what do you think in general?
So, not at FilterCopy. I don't recall us discussing podcasts. I've been on podcasts before. Like I did one for IVM podcasts, which was again, it was a writing-based show and like a creator-based show. And I, from then on, like from a couple of years back, have always had an interest in podcasts. So me personally, like at Array also, when I was at Array, I'd done a podcast, like we did a podcast series with Nina Gupta for Audible. So, and I was also one of the people, one of the writers she interviewed in that. Um, so I've always had a keen eye on podcasts. I know like my best friend in Italy, again, the same who told me about HP Lovecraft, Pixie. He is a huge Joe Rogan mark. Like
Oh
he got,
man.
he was just like, dude, watch his things and like, let's do something like this and like, a cross country thing. And I have seen it, though. I just like right now in India, how many like okay, IVM podcasts are pretty big. Like there are some like that I have heard of. I don't listen to them actively. Like advertising is dead, and a couple of others like Litnama. Um, so these have like how much audience is there? Like I hear of people in my circles, who are like, oh, I love listening to these podcasts or like true crime podcasts. But यहाँ इंडिया में मैंने देखा नहीं. एक पोइट्री वाला पॉडकास्ट है जो राकेश तिवारी he does. It's called the Millennial Kavi, which is I think on Ghana. But apart from that, I'm just wondering, like, at FilterCopy, I don't think we've had a conversation about it. I don't think there's been a serious commitment made towards it yet. But if there are like numbers that we can't ignore with podcasts, then I'm sure that'll be something that we'd want to slice off, because it is big. Like video podcasts, especially like Joe Rogan, से इतना hit नहीं हुआ है ना, like it's huge there. मेरा सिर्फ ये concern है कि इंडिया में अभी तक has it translated fully, like do you see that with other podcaster friends of yours? Do you see someone who's transcended into pop culture the way Joe Rogan has? And do you see that happening in the future?
Podcaster in India is probably Beer Biceps, because he also has like a YouTube presence. So that I think that was his initial hook in getting people on. But I think Beer Bicep, like Ranveer, is a little different to Joe Rogan. Obviously, everyone is right. But the thing is, even with
that comparison,
no, but even in the content he puts out, like the manner in which I have conversations also is very different to how Ranveer puts it out. Like the Ranveer show, it's generally an hour 30 minutes. That's how he does it, and that's fair enough. Like everyone has their own style in podcasting as well. But I like it long form conversation, be it 3 hours of those sorts of things. And I don't think there's a podcast in India of that sort in a video format. Like I was mentioning Amit Varma, he does a great, but it's only audio. But in terms of coming into pop culture, I think it's only Ranveer, like because he has a big Instagram as well. Like he's pretty big on Instagram and all these things.
And I honestly have always looked at Beer Biceps as this guy who just wanted to break into the mold of pop culture. And honestly, like if I see one more fucking LinkedIn sponsored ad or some like I just find that whole motivational stick a little bit annoying for me personally, because there's just like shit like right now when the cyclone had hit and that guy is dancing outside in the rain. Not like I don't see him enduring himself to at least people like me who are real and ground. Like sure, he probably has some stick with people who are looking for like motivation, but oh my god, like just stop telling me that 1 second is the same for you as it is for me, as it is for Mukesh Ambani. Nahi. Like people have other issues in life, and I don't like, at least be a little self-aware that you're a privileged rich kid, at the end of the day, which I don't think he has. And like, this is just my opinion. And that's why, yes, sadly, his brand has worked and transact like so has, I don't know if Ankur Warikoo actually does podcast. Do you know Ankur Warikoo?
Yeah. I tried to bring him on, but we didn't have dates. But the thing is, I haven't seen a lot of Ankur's content, but I don't know.
I don't think he has a podcast though, right? He doesn't do.
Not yet. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think so his is more motivational. That's still fine. But yeah, Beer Biceps, like I'd seen the Tanmay Bhatt episode, which I thought was fine, but I just feel like it's just too much like a marketing tool for himself, which is very transparent to me. Like, in the middle, he's like, no bro, but when I was training you, bro, like I saw ki. I was like, तेरे को कौन पूछा? Like usko baat karne de na. So I feel like we can do much better. We can do 800 times better than, like, I feel like you're already a 10 times better listener than Ranveer Alabadia could ever be. So I think maybe all podcasters need to be better listeners in India, and not just like, marketing is an important part of anything. Yes, like market yourself, but don't make it as cringe as Beer Biceps. And this is coming from a FilterCopy writer. Okay, so like it must, like, I know cringe. Okay, and I just.
No, that's fair. And see, those are some criticism. And as I put forward as well, like I've had other podcasters as well who I have spoken about Beer Biceps too. And I mean, that's fair. Like, as I said, that's his way of doing content. I mean, kudos to him. If he's doing it perfectly fine. I mean, I think that's my main qualm with him, is because it's too mainstreamy for me. Like, as you were talking about, like if you're making the same content that, let's say, if someone who is wanting to get into YouTube would make, like, I don't know, if there's a media company on TV which would get into onto YouTube, would make the same sort of content, which is like, if he's getting a personality on as well, like some of them, I don't even know if you can call them podcasts, because like 20 minutes with Priyanka Chopra or whatever. And then it's not even getting to the crux of the thing, because that's the same interview she'd give on any of the media channels. Like, so is,
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's the same criticism I have as well. But yeah, it's his way. So who knows? Who cares? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, look, respect the hustle.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, dude, I just feel like thoda kam agar, I don't know, like I don't buy into that whole stick. Like it just seems a little too, like, वो क्या बोलते हैं उसको, the
very Gary V.
Yeah. It's like Gary V, and also like just those, town jaake jo salesmen karte the in the old Wild West, like those potion, like they used to sell whatever, like elixir sellers, that this will cure your thing. Like I just feel I get that vibe from him, like the con karne wala salesman type vibe from him, which I just don't know. Maybe that, and again, that's just me, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's pretty big, so like whatever. But the thing is,
congrats to him on that. But yeah,
see, another thing which you touched upon in terms of listening, in terms of conversation and podcasting, I think that's so crucially important though, because I've heard several people talk about this aspect, that as you were saying, when you're talking, I simply have to focus on what you're saying and not think about what I'm going to say next, almost, if that makes sense. Because as you were saying as well, with the example of Ranveer or anyone for that matter, we always fall into the trap of saying that, Acha, how can I make this reference so that Jackie thinks I'm smart or something? Or do you know what I mean? Like, it's not entirely focusing on the conversation as well, which is what everyone is doing really, like, which is what TV does, like anchors do. So yeah, that is something as a podcaster, like I always try to guard against, man. Yeah.
And that's good. I think that's a very important quality to have when you're interviewing. And or podcasting in this case. Yeah, but yeah, if more people did it, I think it'd just be better.
So you currently don't see like a market as such for podcasting, or like you still think it'll take a lot of time for it to become as big
I
into
think
pop culture?
it needs to evolve a little more. I'm pretty sure it will, given our country actually has like it always comes down to how huge a market we are, and we're a huge market. We're a billion plus market, and eventually now we touched upon geo already, which is there. Eventually, I think agar kuch aur regionalize karke, kuch aur you tailor the market, right? Like, it's like what they say about cracking into the Indian car industry. People used to say was very tough because it's a very price sensitive market. There are the Indian consumer is very emotion and price driven, right? I touched upon how we are all emotional. Podcasts, I think, will need to find their own Indianized way into the hearts of the Indian public, like, because right now, in many ways, I don't see a lot of difference between the podcasts in the US and here. That it's not been that novelty factor, or like what makes it really relatable. I don't think is there yet. I think the podcaster you mentioned though, Amit
Verma.
Amit, he's the slow interview with, he's that, no?
I mean, that is Nilesh Mishra.
That's relationship.
Yeah.
So
I'm not with Nilesh Mishra. I'm not sure if he has it on audio. Like, obviously
video.
it's on YouTube. It's on YouTube, but I don't know if he's convert. If I have seen an interview of his, it's only on YouTube. I don't think I've heard it only on the audio also. So I'm not sure if he's touching into the audio markets.
Tell me something. Sorry, but podcasts में कैसा होता है कि only if it's audio does it count as, or is it like Joe Rogan's is also a podcast only? No, it's just that it's short.
So Joe Rogan, he's a podcaster. He just puts a video up as well. Like, podcasts in essence are audio. People simply, like, I put it up on YouTube as well, because I know, and because some podcasters are out there who I like watching video as well, because I like the manner in which conversation goes and how people come up with ideas. But that's not all people, because I know several people of my friends and in general as well who I have had conversations with. They say that they only listen to the audio versions. They don't listen to it on YouTube.
It's you listen to it in the background. It's like audio books, right? I get it. I get that, but I feel like video is a good, like exactly what you're doing. It's a good practice to have video of that, because I know there are people who probably watch go to YouTube, click on the video, maybe have it play in the background while they're doing their stuff.
Yeah.
But it's the same. Like, it's good to glimpse onto the thing when you've heard something interesting. Maybe play it back to see what the vibe of the room was then. And in general, I've been a huge advocate for video first. Like, we are a video first sort of society in today's day and age. No matter what it is, if it's not on video, like, it's not, photos also are not enough anymore. Like, which I hate personally, because I love photos, but it's all become video because it's just become so accessible with our phones and TikTok and reels, and everything is just video first. So yeah, I definitely see the future of podcasting in India, at least, being video first, because वो culture लाने में थोड़ा time जाएगा. और अभी also like Beer Biceps, like I don't know if he doesn't have an audio approach at all. It's just like I need the video. I'm sure he tells his team, shoot this and like put it up, because he's a YouTuber first. I don't think he's a podcaster per se. So yeah, I think the future for me, to sum it up, would be one, localizing podcasts in a way that appeal to the Indian audiences, finding touch points, finding guests, finding content markers within the personality of the podcaster that is very truly desi at heart. And second would be remembering that we right now would have to really regress to go back to being podcasting, because like हमारे इसमें radio और वो सब का बहुत अहम हिस्सा था. Like, our parents used to listen to radio, All India Radio, all of that. I think they would look at it as a step back. They'd want video. So I think, yeah, the second point would be all of them need to realize the importance of video.
I think
Biceps does very well. Yeah.
I think another reason why I also have a video component to my podcast is simply because obviously I mentioned the fact that I like consuming it in video as well, if it's even a podcast. But also, I feel YouTube is so much more superior when it comes to the audio platforms, because I feel YouTube is a time machine of sorts. Like, even if I've had a conversation with you right now, and perhaps it goes out
Yeah.
sometime in a week, 2 weeks, whenever, maybe this conversation
Yeah.
is heard by some person 2 or 3 years down the line, which you can sort
Down the
of do
line,
on
yeah.
audio, which you can sort of do on audio by searching, but it's more difficult
Yeah.
to search and find that particular episode or find that particular thing.
And the thumbnail will tell you so much. I'm sure, like, you title a video a certain way, someone puts similar search keywords year, 2 years down the line. That's, and I still like, so on unerased poetry in
Yeah.
2017, like I'd done this poem and like it went viral at the time. And like I still to this day, like people send me a message saying, I saw your thing. It's a very, like, yeah, it is a time machine. I think you put
Yeah.
it best. I can't put it better than that. It is a time machine. Like it is there, like stuff that you type in your name and it just shows up as a record. So hopefully some LinkedIn, some HR manager will not search for me for the next job hunt and be like, oh, but मैंने तुम्हारा podcast देखा था. What did you say about HR?
See, but Jackie, I think there's another thing to it, and I don't want to sort of restrict it down to this component, but I think that, as you were talking about, we're a very video centric society, right? I think that's so true. And I don't know, and I've mentioned this too. I think there was RJ Kanika who I had on my show, and she does a show from Mumbai. She's a radio host. And I said that it's very difficult, and you guys must have faced it as well as radio people, to get a viral audio moment. You can only
Yeah.
sort of have a viral video moment. If even if it's a podcast, if you have like a camera on, then you can have like I think this was Joe Rogan as well when he said that when he got the Spotify deal, they initially weren't wanting video because it's very difficult to convert, because Spotify didn't have a video component to them. So he said that no, I'm not going to sign the deal if there's no video, because he said that if I have someone like an Elon Musk on, like that visual of
Exactly, that's the money. That's I'm sorry, but yeah, I like not shitting on the podcast thing at all. But if you have video, your scope to pivot just is endless, right? The potential, because aaj ut ke bhi, like if you like the audio viral moment thing, unless it is a celebrity abusing on audio, it never goes viral. Like Kapil Sharma
even
ka wo call
bro
viral
even
हुआ था.
bro even then, like अभी तक किसी ने गॉडसे का टेस्टिमोनियल तक नहीं सुना है भाई, उसने क्यों गांधी को मारा था. And that's only audio. I'm sure if he had like a video
of it, I'm sure they'd make a Netflix series of it. Who knows? Like the confessional tapes of
Nathuram Godse.
what to cancel करवाएगा मुझको. Don't make me talk about these things.
Nay, man, but that's so true, man. Like there's so much to it. See, listen, there was some other things I sort of wanted to get into. You guys write a lot about relationships as such, and this aspect of how people should go about relationship, how relationships play out in society, in Indian society as such. Like obviously that stuff is content, but how do you in general think about relationships, and how do, as Jackie, as a like leave screenwriting aside, but yeah, what are your thoughts on relationship in general, and whatever your thoughts are, do they sort of then transcend into your writing?
Yeah, I think I've made most of my work like has been based on my relationships. A lot of, and again, this is not, I'm not saying this is the case for all writers, but I cherry pick a lot of moments from past relationships or past moments, romantic or otherwise, or insights that happened when I had my first crush, or these kind of things. Or if I've heard of instances from my life of like a close friend when we were in college and liked a girl and didn't know how to approach her, I always like to use those as start points or like thought starters. And then always I keep asking myself, ha, or fir kya? पर इसको और like, okay, how do we add more conflict into this prevalent situation, which is relatable, which happens to people. And yeah, like for relationships, especially when writing like relationship based videos, I think it's important to always get a consensus of whether this is relatable, because you can have some moments in your life if you're like very, lack of a better term, well versed with the dating scene, or like have had a bit of dating history. you can, that's you. Okay, like you can have a certain knowledge of it, but for most people, um, I think relatable relationship stories come from longing. They come from a certain level of like, okay, that mystery of it, does she like me back? And even in a relationship, like especially with Indian audiences, it's there's a lot of subtext. You can't just go all the way and like tell them that, oh yes, like banging. That's not something that goes hand in hand. So I try to censor, I think, a lot of like my own relationship experiences and try to put them in a more warm, uh, fuzzy, wholesome light. That's how I approach it.
When it comes to YouTube content in India, especially, is like relationships type of content does really well, like boyfriend, girlfriend, this sort of stuff. Like, and I don't know what the reason is, because I don't think that does so well in, let's say, the West. And perhaps my sort of low level understanding of this is that maybe because relationships and those sorts of things are so taboo in our culture, perhaps, like even if we're perhaps living in a tier 1 city, so maybe our thing is short sighted, but looking at other cities, it's not so easy to go on a date with a girl or something of that sort, because it's not looked at in the same way. So perhaps
Yeah.
even speaking to her at school or something of that sort, sharing, asking for a pen or pencil, maybe good, because that, and is that the reason then that perhaps that sort of content is propelled and more people want to go and watch acha boyfriend girlfriend type content on YouTube India?
Um, yeah, I think there is an element of living vicariously through these videos, which is what I brought up like about the aspirational bit also. Be it like live in relationships or be it even like going for a very intimate kind of date or having a first kiss, um, for not just hormonal teens, but people who haven't had that kind of exposure to like a dating life or like haven't been able to somehow like experience a love life. I think for them it's interesting and it's something that they watch, and that's why we get a lot of comments that say कि ये तो सपनों की दुनिया में होता है, ये होता ही नहीं है. Like, oh, FilterCopy loves making us feel single and all of that, because yeah, people don't like it highlights the divide between like tier 1 and like the rest of the country, like, and our intention is never to say that, oh, look at what we're experiencing. We're trying to put out there a more aspirational side of the coin. And yeah, like what I brought out earlier is that a lot of people, I think, like we do manage to change mindsets through that. We do manage to normalize live-ins or normalize like dating, giving things a shot. Like this country has one of the worst cases of like people being like jumping into marriages too soon and then being unhappy. I think that would change if people's attitudes were more open towards like dating or like premarital, not just like intimacy, but just getting to know each other. Courtship. We tend to put things in such a bubble. So yeah, man, I'd say that the way FilterCopy has in the last 5 years, 5, 6, almost 6 years now, portrayed relationships, everything from the little things to Ayush, Barkha, uh, to just all the couples we've had. I would like to think we've managed to change the perception of pan India, of live-ins, of uh, the overall like heteronormative dating. Rather, I wouldn't say we have much to do with. Like now we started to do content that shows same-sex couples, LGBTQ, which is again a very aspirational step, and we have a ways to go there also. But especially with the views on this, we've at least gotten people to talk. कि ये भी होता है, शहरों में होता है, ठीक है. But then you have a Lukka Chupi type movie come out, which also I again would like to think that FilterCopy had something to do with that. कि वो conversation भी शुरू हुई. So yeah.
Yeah. See, something I was watching this interview of Sanjay Leela Bansali, and he's another ascetic in himself, really. But so And there was this interview where he says that, and I quote, "My films are about people and personal suffering. I do not want to make films about social messages." So, end quote. So, the particular thing I want to ask you here is that with FilterCopy, and perhaps we have already tackled this.
Mm.
So, whenever you're writing a script as such,
Mm.
do you simply focus on the craft, or do you already have something in mind that acha ki we have to portray live-in relationships in a manner, so and then my craft has to be modeled in that way? I'm just giving live-in relationships as the topic of the loosely as the video,
Got
but
it.
or is it the craft comes first and then agar social message hai then good, if not then
ऐसा हमने कभी actually बाहर जाके, if you see in our videos also, it's never mentioned that they are in a live-in. It's just, it is normalized. Like, this is probably the first instance of someone from the FilterCopy team even acknowledging the live-in aspect of it. But um, it's never the intention that we want to change, like we want to we want to send a social message. It's just very casually, like, affirming the fact that this happens and it's okay that it happens. And that's why you don't even give it a second thought. Like, we did one video, which was called when your friend group is single, okay, where all these people are single. And in the opening scene of that, this girl talks about her breakup and she says, "Yeah, Anjali has broken up with me." And nobody bats an eyelid. They go like, "Oh, you'll get many other better ones." And that's it. There is no mention of, but this is normal, this happens. No, it's very that, like, um, it's just, it's like, this is part of life, you know, like, just deal with it. Stop otherizing these people for making certain lifestyle choices
yeah?
is the approach we have. It's not social messaging per se. It's just normalizing.
What do you think in general, though, like in broader terms about art? It could be any form of art. It could be books. It could be films. It could be sketches on YouTube, etc. Do you think that they have to have a social messagey framework to it? Whatever the art form be, it should be presenting sort of a message after it? Or do you feel that the art can exist in itself, and then whatever derivations you may have of it in terms of how you may think about the world through the particular art piece is good in itself, that it gets served its purpose?
I think art is really whatever makes you feel something, you know. Like, I have really, like, the more art I consume, the more I realize that there's really no boundary. Like, Raju Srivastav makes art, okay, because he makes people laugh.
Yeah.
Sure, our circles consider such things cringe, or, like, there's always going to be opinions on art, okay, like, but if you're moving someone with what you do, I think you've accomplished it. So I think art has a big role, like, when done right. Any kind of it, like, be it stand up, be it writing, be it painting, be it sculpting. I think when you're finished with your art, when you make it as an artist, and that final finished piece, if it can have an impact on your audience, that's art. And you know, it goes a long way to build societal legacies, which is why I think architecture is such a strong proponent of history. When you go to Europe, or you look at the architecture, and you can tell what kind of sort of mental bandwidth these people had, how they thought, because based on the kind of artistic expression they had through their buildings, through their monuments, through their art, like, not just Renaissance, but everything, dude. Like, even like old Mughal scriptures, old like the I'm drawing a blank with the name, dude. No, it's not Mohenjo. It's the
The Harappan civilization.
temples, and you know,
Oh
the
yeah.
dramatic art there. Expression of art tells you so much about that time. Probably was a more progressive time than we are living in today. You know, it's true. So
Yeah.
I think art is great as symbolism for the generations that have gone by. And yeah, like, we'll be remembered, our generation, as the ones who made TikToks and
Hmm.
reels, and they'll have a lot of, like, analysis of this 70 years from now, like young kids will look back at our generation and be like, they made this, and they'll probably have appreciation for it.
So is that how you define it then? For example, art is something that moves you in a certain sense, and that could be any form of art.
Yeah, definitely. It's what moves you, and it's what encompasses the times, you know. At least that's how I view it. Like if I were to show my kids 20 years from now, okay, a FilterCopy video, I want them to feel what I wrote at that time. Because like emotions don't go out of style, right? They remain. A sad scene in the 70s is a sad scene now. Jay dying at the end of Sholay is sad now. You know, Mughal-e-Azam is
Oh,
tragic.
Yeah. What a piece. Yeah.
Hera Fairy is funny now. Like it's just, maybe comedy doesn't age that well, actually, to be honest, because if you watch, like, what is your take on Friends?
I mean, I understand why people like it, but it's fine. Like I don't rate it that highly. No.
Samjha. And that's the thing, like a lot of people have this big love or hate relationship with Friends because it is one of those shows that hasn't aged as well. Like I also realized, like, of course, there's the other thing spoken about. The thing that's spoken about the most is the not enough representation of the minorities in New York. And like, it wasn't a representation of New York properly because it was too white. And New York is probably one of the most cosmopolitan cities. That's the most enduring criticism. But I've also realized how casually they promoted an image of body shaming. Like they promoted a unhealthy body image by body shaming constantly. Like there's fat Monica who's sort of just reduced to a punchline. There's ugly naked guy who, when you do see him, is kind of like rotund, and because of that he's ugly. And you know, there are these little things that could only be passed off then. So comedy, I feel like what you make fun of has sort of not aged as well. Like you could do blackface in the 70s and 80s, and
Yeah.
it just got passed off as haha punchline. But now,
See, but Jackie, do you feel with that it always has to be taken in context? For example, and I don't think I would only limit it only to comedy. So
Mm.
I mentioned Sanjay Leela Bhansali a little earlier, but he said that with Padmavat, he said one of the primary reasons also why it did so well in the West was also because it depicted the manner in which India was in that particular time, and it didn't sort of, however much obviously the censor both censored it, in the final product that did come out, they still tried to live up to that expectation. So I don't know if you remember, there's this scene wherein Ranveer.
I've not seen Padmavat.
Okay, but then there are some scenes in which Ranveer Singh, he's really whatever in the modern term may be considered, let's say, toxic masculinity, and among those things. But however, how I consider it is that you have to take it in context in which period the film is representing, the time. And this is okay, so this is a rendition of almost a historical period. So this is also a different argument to make. But then I would say something of that sort to be made for a film that was made bad in the day, back in the day. So it was made, if it was made back in the day, then obviously you have to take into consideration what happened in that particular scenario it was made in. So see, that's another thing, because people are very quick to cancel several of these shows simply because they don't fit into the modern narrative that we have laid out, which I would always try to guard against, in my opinion.
नहीं बात सही है ना, exactly, because what was possible as humor or toxic masculinity, or I mean not toxic masculinity, but what was possible as normal behavior back then, today, like in the current scenario we live in, a lot of people have taken a lot of efforts and almost devoted their whole lives to enlightening folks कि यार ये थोड़ा problematic है, इसको कम करो because you're offending people. And that's fair. I get it. Again, I think it comes back to our point earlier of like, now social media is like everyone is vocal and has an opinion, and you know, people are a little more, I wouldn't say sensitive, but they're a little more conscious of these things. Like see, toxic masculinity is a totally different argument. Like you watch any Sunny Deol movie, you watch any like Shah Rukh Khan movie from the 90s, like there's just normalized Eve teasing. There's AIB did a very nice video about it called Eve Teasing Through the Ages. in like Bollywood songs, like subtle, like just consent that's being trivialized, which I I don't know if that's actually, dude. Fuck, what are we talking about? Like this month, Radhe that came out, even that has instances of this where Salman Khan's character dupes Disha Patani into giving him a lift, or like it's a lot of these. It's a little pervasive problem. We have a long way to go, basically. And to come back to your question about art and looking at it from the lens of like that time, sure, yes, that's very doable now. But if we don't learn from that, and if we don't like start actively calling out people in writers' rooms, like a lot of my co-writers who are females, I always listen to them. When they say कि ये ना थोड़ा problematic zone में जा रहा है, you probably don't mean it, पर it doesn't look good, it's थोड़ा sexist, and that's fair. Like we should be called out. Anytime I have that opportunity to educate myself, I take it in my stride and I go like, हाँ यार ये conditioning है मेरी, मैं क्या करूँ? सबका है यार. Like we've not grown up in very woke circles. Even in urban centers, like how often have you said, Ishan, कि the crowd there is not very good, कि crowd thoda shady hai wahan pe? You've said it, right? Do you realize that is also like a microaggression? Because when we say that the crowd here is thoda shady, or oh my god, these guys, like that is like saying that, oh, these spaces are only for certain kind of people and not the rest. Or if you say ki shit, how have you not played Grand Theft Auto, or like how have you not watched a Quentin Tarantino film, you are unknowingly setting the precedent that, oh, because you didn't have access to this kind of pop culture growing up, I am above you, or like you are beneath me. So all of these things, I mean, if you go into the nitty-gritties, right, nothing you say cannot offend someone.
Yeah.
Somewhere. So सिर्फ ऐसा है कि अगर तुमने किया है और call out करता है कोई, be magnanimous about it and say कि I'll do better and I'll educate myself. Nobody is perfect, and we are all woke in progress, so to speak. And yeah, like art plays a big role in that. Art can condition you the wrong way sometimes, but like that is not your choice. The art you consumed as a kid and what formed you. What is your choice is starting to take cognizance and not be ignorant about it. That is your choice. To change is your choice. To tell yourself, okay, I will be better. That is your choice. And if that happens through art, nothing like it.
Listen, Jackie, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thanks for coming on and wasting so much time with me. I'm thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Is there something you'd like to leave the viewers, the listeners with? Perhaps a message you'd like to leave, your social media handles, just anything, feel free.
Sure, man. You can follow me on Juvenile Jack on Instagram and Twitter. That's just why it's called Juvenile, is because I was a juvenile delinquent as a teenager. I went like to jail and all of that. It was just a whole different thing.
Oh shit.
But,
probably some like a teaser for our next conversation, perhaps.
No, man. We can talk about my past as a juvenile delinquent. Why not? But no, I thank you, Ishan, for having me. This has been such a pleasure. Like, you're doing amazing work, and I wish you all the best for all your other podcasts. And like, really, I hope that we can reconnect in the future, and you really play a big part in bringing podcasts into the mainstream of like the Indian consumer, like who consumes content. So yeah, man, I wish you all the best. Thank you again for having me. This has been a blast. Just two hours or so, just breezy, good times. And yeah, sorry for the delays here and there. I hope I wasn't too much of a bother.
No, man, this has been great. Thanks for coming on once again, and bye, guys.
Thank you, Ishan. Take care.